I'm going to mute myself.
Not working. So frustrating. Live.
So,
All right. Let our friends trickle in. Is there a way to like force this thing to log on? It's not connecting.
I'm not sure. I haven't tried to get on.
Are you just using the public?
Well, I'm trying to use the guest one. Yeah, just because I have the general plan draft pulled up on my computer in offline mode, but I don't have it here. I mean, I guess we'll go through it on that. But
Let me see if I can get somebody from IT.
Huh.
I just feel like commissioner should have a password to the actual
Mhm.
thing. It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never known the password for our Wi-Fi here. I just use, we're all connected with the.
Oh, sure. It's just
So
direct-
I was able to log in, and I don't know if our machines are different.
No, normally I
But-
can. It's just not, for some reason, not working.
Hmm.
Sorry, we'll pull it up on the screen. Poor John got pummeled with my 150 notes in the middle of the night a few days ago. I was
Yeah.
on a roll.
I did that to him last week.
I
Track changes. Paragraph.
know.
Sorry, John. So much for the integrity of the original draft. It's gone.
It's better than the alternative, you
I know
know?
right now I'm actually, usually I teach a class, but I'm just a TA in this class for USU. And they're doing their, and so anyways, I'm like reading a few people, I offered to just edit or read their, and I'm just like, yeah, the amount of, that I'm writing is more than they wrote.
Yeah.
I'm saying,
In there. Use free.
I like that kind of feedback.
I love the track changes so much.
Mm.
Right, right.
I live in
This is what I'm getting stuck on.
that's
It's just a
strange.
blank white screen. And normally
That
it'll
dot
have
went
you,
away.
yeah. So it's like,
You're right.
I've seen this before, but it passes you through. Anyway.
And both of the, I had to click the free service and access.
That's what I
page.
did. And then, of course, my phone is new-ish, and I guess I haven't used a hotspot on it because I haven't traveled in 2
You want to
years.
try my hotspot?
It's not. Yeah. We'll pull it up. Very much first world problems. We'll just say that. you know. But I figure out how to turn on your hotspot on your phone now. All right.
We're reaching out to Ruben to see if he can come help us.
Still waiting for a few more. Hey, Steve,
Hey, everyone.
the 3 o'clock went late, huh?
Yeah, I feel like anytime I write that, that just dooms me for a long.
It's like bringing a raincoat to a concert or the
Yeah.
alternative.
How are you all doing?
Doing well.
Good. Good.
And I know OB is, you doing good, Steve? Everything's good on your end?
Yeah.
Good.
Things are good.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Am I counting this right? Me, Tony, Steve, Obi, and Josie. We're missing Rick and Maketa, but I'm going to go ahead at 4:02 and call us to order. So this is the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, and we will begin with citizens to be heard. Are there any citizens on the line who wish to speak or make a comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to ex parte communications and disclosures. We don't have any action items on our agenda, so I don't think we would have any need for that. So we'll move on to approval of minutes from November 22nd. Does anyone have any comments about the minutes? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd move that we approve the minutes.
The Wi-Fi for this laptop
All right, we have a motion from OB
is not working.
and do we have a
I'll
second?
second.
Second by Steve. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3. That is unanimous. Josie, is that an aye from you?
I'm going to abstain since I wasn't at that meeting.
Okay, 4 in favor and 1 abstention. Sorry, y'all, just one moment. So I was trying to use the free service and I click proceed and it just sticks me on this page. Yeah, so I don't know if you could help me, but we want to be able to get that up. And if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so troubleshooting on the fly. We'll move on to our vote on planning commission seats. So we don't have Makeda. Oh, she is here. Hi, Makeda. Perfect. So we have 3 commissioners whose terms are expiring at the end of this year, myself, Makeda, and Tony. And we had 3 applications for these seats, myself, Makeda, and Tony. Normally, what we would do is interview the applicants, given that it's a 3-for-3 match and we are on the body. We do have the option of suspending the rules if we decide that interviews are not necessary in order to make a recommendation one way or another. So I'll leave it at that and see if there's any interest in proceeding one way or another.
Well, I'd, at least so we can discuss it, I'd like to suggest that we suspend our bylaws and not have the interview with the 3 candidates. I think we probably, well, that's not part of the motion. But we do know them. So the 3 candidates, and then you may want to separate these motions, but that's up to somebody later discussing, because the last part of it is, I then suggest that we send a recommendation to the county council that they reappoint these 3 people to the planning commission.
Okay, is there a second to that motion or an interest in separating them?
I will second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to suspend our bylaws and move a favorable recommendation for the 3 applicants forward to the county commission without holding interviews. Any discussion before we take a vote?
Ooh, but how fun it would have been to grill you.
Oh,
would have
man. Well, you could put in an alternate motion if you want to.
No, unequivocally, no alternative motion from me.
Okay, all right. Well, with that, I'll take a call in favor of OB's motion to suspend the bylaws and move a favorable recommendation forward without interviews for Makeda, Tony, and myself. All in favor, raise your hand. And Makeda, are you abstaining or are you voting? Okay, so that is 1, 2, 3. How many of this? There's 6 of us now. 6 in favor.
I wasn't sure if I was allowed to vote.
You are allowed to vote. Yes, yes. Support thyself. So I'll draft a letter to Tara for the county commission. I'll forward it. Wonderful. All right. So that moves us on to county commission meeting action items. And there was quite a busy county commission meeting. Lots
There
going on.
was a busy, shockingly, it actually went really
It
quickly.
did go fast.
I know, I was like, oh man, we could be here for a while, right?
Even though it did go really late, but it could have gone to like 10 or something.
I know, no, so I just kind of going over the quick things that I think pertain to you. So there was approval on the amended and restated development agreement for Murphy Flats, HDHO, and that passed unanimously. There was adopting a resolution for the final plat on the Red Cliffs Ranch amended plan development. It was basically like a lot line adjustment. Is that correct? That passed unanimously. There was adopting a resolution for the final plat of Walking Horse subdivision on Sunny Acres. That passed unanimously because I think it was like 4.2 acres subdividing into 4. So, right. Yep. So that seemed to be no problem. I think it was interesting. We finally approved the redistricting maps. That's a big deal. I don't know the last time that the Grand County has been redistricted. Am I saying that correctly? But Kevin and Sarah Stock put just a ton of time into that. And specifically, there was a couple, Carter Pape, am I saying his name? He said that this, yeah. There was a few just, citizens that put in quite a bit of work also. So I want to thank them. But we came up with a redistricting map called Contiguous Neighborhoods. And basically you have east Spanish Valley that encompasses that and all of everything else outside of, the valley, basically. And that will stay my district, but it is now district, I believe, number 1. Am I saying that correct? Yeah, that's a little weird. I don't know if he wrote this. I think he made a slight mistake there. And then there is West Spanish Valley now also with some other like little surrounding areas. It's kind of a bubble that goes up and around Moab, but it's really not a populated area. So that's great in my mind because you have 2 representatives from Spanish Valley. And then just some divvying up of the city. So what will happen, and kind of going into this transition plan really quickly. So there is some overlap. So basically new district number 2 is assigned to Evan Clapper because that's his district, and the next election on that will be 2024. District number 3, and sorry, I can't really, I should have had it to where I could show a map, and I'm not doing that. Assigned to Hadler, and again, the next election for that district will be 2024. District number 4, I believe right now, it contains Sarah Stocks, but that will end in 2022. So that will be up for a new election. And I'm now assigned to district number 1, and my next election is 2024. And then district number 5, and I don't think he wrote this right. But anyways, there's basically this new district within Spanish Valley, and there's no sitting commissioners, but that again will come into election in 2022. So we'll retain current commissioners until November of 2022, and there'll be some people up to run, basically.
Great.
So it's a little interesting.
Yeah.
And so basically the goal was, when we were looking at those redistricting maps because I've heard some hubbub out, like, Kevin Walker developed, this is one of the things I heard. Kevin Walker developed the software for the redistricting maps. It's like, no, he didn't. It came out of, I believe it was Tulane or Tufts. I get the 2 mixed up. The goal was to basically divide the population equally. And so these are all within probably 50, and then also just having clean lines. So in our last district, there was actually a district that was divided, and that's really not okay. And so to just have some really clean lines, either natural boundaries or boundaries that make sense. And so I think Kevin and Sarah did a really, really good job looking at that. Really, yeah.
I'm
So
glad to see the representation of Spanish Valley.
Yeah, I know.
Preventable.
I'm excited about
That's
that
great,
too. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And then just lastly, there was all these public hearings that are open. We didn't really have any comment during those public hearings, but they are still open. So the one about the high density housing overlay for Desert Soul. We also have the other one for the overnight accommodation overlay rezone out in Sky Retreat in Westwater. And then I just want to state this, I really hope that you guys are looking at the county's budget and willing to make some comments on that, because that is open for public comment right now. So for 2022, and Chris does an awesome job, but there's still some things that, I think definitely deserve some,
Just taking a look at it.
yeah, people taking a look at it and seeing if you agree. Because we definitely had, if you want to go back and look at the meeting for the budget hearing, there was definitely some dissent in the ranks. That's okay. But we had we weren't agreeing.
I missed the end of the discussion around the OAO on Spanish Valley Drive, the larger one on the east side.
You mean the HGHO?
Excuse me. That's
Yeah.
what I meant. Yes.
Yeah, so it was basically just they're adding the 2 lots. They'd been to planning commission back in like 2020.
Yeah.
And then they were stalled out from like the litigation that was going on around HGHO. So they were told to stay put, and they couldn't really move forward. And but Christina gave them the thumbs up to go ahead and go finish getting their final approval from county
Oh, no, you're fine. I
commission.
just missed
So they're
it.
just adding the 2 lots.
Okay.
So it went from 40 to 42.
That's right.
And it's not it's within the HGH 15 density allowance
Mhm.
for that acreage. And then they're not changing anything from like the way they're orienting the buildings or anything
Right.
like that.
They're all kind of
They have like a really nice visual like rendering of the project.
Saw that in packet,
Yeah.
yeah. And I couldn't remember, does that add any additional deed restricted units or does it just increment up on
I
the?
think it
odd
must
number.
add at least one. I cannot remember now, but yeah, it might be that it had to adjust that a little bit.
I was,
Um,
well, I caught all but the last few minutes of the.
Right.
All right,
Okay, that's it.
thank you for a very thorough update. It's very exciting to see things start to come out of the backlog as well.
Yeah.
Very good.
I mean, I guess I should state that, one of the things in the budget is that basically Chris Barrett is going to move into more of a, I guess if you want to call it a CFO, he's really just going to be doing, the county budget
Budget,
and
yeah.
working on that. And then Mallory's going to take over administrative,
Yeah.
administrative duties. Yeah.
Right.
So I think it's great. I
Yeah.
think they're a great team and I think they've both been kind of overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And so hopefully this will help both of their feelings a little more. I'm okay. I can do this, not burn out. Because I
Yeah.
think they're both just, they're working a lot.
Yeah.
So
Any-
I'm excited.
Any questions for Trish with regards to Steve's back? He's excited. County Commission update.
He's so excited.
No, sorry, it was very cold in my house. I had to go.
I caught you off guard.
Oh, B, is it cold in your house? You got your beanie on. What do you got going on there?
Oh, you're
You're
muted.
muted.
We have a beautiful south-facing home. It's passively solar. On days like today, we never use any heat at all, but it's getting cold now and I'll put on a fire after the meeting.
Right, yeah. Nice.
Any other questions for Trish? All right, Rick joined us in the middle of that. Welcome, Rick. You missed the vote to pass the 3 applicants forward, so Tony and Maketa and myself. Okay, so that takes us to our planning and zoning updates. So before we dive into this, I'd love to just, this is something that could take us 4 hours or it's something that could take us 40 minutes. So Elisa, just on this first item, general plan update, what we've done is we've taken the full text of the general plan and divvied it up just for areas of focus and depth. So I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to talk through their area and raise any questions, but is there anything, what do you need at this point from us to move this
I
forward?
think John was gonna go over this attachment number 1 with the general plan and strategic plan and the timetable. And so I'll hand it over to John and then we can get into kind of your all's feedback.
Great. And John, before I hand it over to you, I realize I never sent you the list. You have the goal of doing the same thing for the county commission, of sort of divvying up and assigning a
Okay.
county commissioner, but we'll offline that after this meeting
Okay.
and with Mary and you and make sure we're
Okay,
all on the
great.
same page.
That sounds.
And then
great.
we'll
That's
pair
a
up.
great idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay,
All right, John, if-
want me to take it away, Emily?
go for it. Yes.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
here's what we thought corporately, and speaking for Lisa a bit, is that the commission tonight would give their presentations, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that, and just kind of highlight the areas that they've looked at and what issues they've got. We didn't want to get into a staff commission debate. We can always do that later. What we're hoping to get is more testimony. We can call it, maybe that's too formal, but at least something with your critique. And then you could debate it amongst yourselves. That's what the format we were thinking. We would then capture that as best we could, and you could submit the text as well. And that would form part of the stakeholder engagement, which is going to be ongoing for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And it doesn't end actually until potentially we go to public review and planning commission review again in February. Does that make sense? That format? I don't know if there's any questions. The commission has any questions about that for tonight, I mean. Okay, I was going to walk through the timetable here, which is somewhat tentative. This was presented to the county commission on Tuesday. By the way, it was just as Trish was going through the redistricting plan, we've asked Chris if we can contact Kevin and Sarah directly and think about getting our neighborhoods together. They are kind of hard to make discrete, but one of the goals usually in planning is to align elected officials with their neighborhoods as best you can. And I realize with 7, that's difficult to do, especially when you got 2 at large. So we're hoping that we can compare notes with the work they've done and then come back with that community representation and with a public engagement strategy in the next phase, which is that full public engagement thing, which would potentially start March 1st of 2022. Anyway, I thought I'd just throw that in there for discussion. So the first, the draft general plan was sent out to stakeholders on November the 19th. And then December staff meetings, vetting of the strategic plan and general plan, and that's kind of what we're doing tonight. Steering committee update, that was done on December the 2nd. December 13th is this workshop. See how everything's unfolding as it should, Madam Chair. January 4th, the Joint Planning Commission and County Commission workshop. We're hoping that will be an implementation strategy. That's taking a list of priorities from all of the policies that are in the plan and prioritizing. And we'll put a framework together that helps manage that. That sounds like a big job, but the goal is to actually come up with some high priorities, and we'll have an action timetable drafted for that too. You might want to comment on section 15, which is the OCP, or the OCP, Canada, the general plan implementation strategy. So, and it's got some elements in it too. So as Steve and I talked about on Friday, one of the major tasks of the commission members and stakeholders is to search through their sections, pull out the action items that are there, think through how important those are to you, if they make sense. Maybe they don't, the policies turned into action items, I should say. And those we're going to extract and put them into the implementation strategy, which is going to turn into an action timetable. So the plan, so the eventual adopted general plan with lots of gaps will form the basis for a policy, a big policy document going forward. And it will also serve, hopefully, as a background for a staff report. For every staff report that goes to the Planning Commission, and the County Commission will have a general plan reference. So that's activating the general plan. There's a number of different working groups, task forces, standing committees that we'll need to work with as well as part of those actions, and they'll be designated within the action plan. I'll stop there and just see if that's okay with the commission so far, if they're following me. Sometimes I go a bit too fast.
John, I know that there's been some confusion over the scale of this project about this phase versus the actual sort of actioning on it, the more tactical pieces. Can you just take a couple seconds just to clearly articulate what comes out of this process and when we start to address those more tactical elements?
Yeah. Okay, so this is an overview of really where the gaps are. So that's why it's top down. And I don't have no hesitation saying top down. I know that scares some people, but because part of this is public engagement and decision making, which is in there too. It's never been in, there's a lot of things that have never been in the general plan that I know of anyway. Public engagement, decision making, land use strategies have been there, fiscal impact's been there, resort management's been there because it's state law. All the other elements, finance, public safety, fire, police, fire sheriff, emergency services, emergency response. There's a whole list. There's 10 elements really. The goal is to actually go through those and see where the gaps are. And in our case, there's lots of gaps. In fact, there's not even elements in some cases. And then start to identify how they can be filled, how they can or not be filled, whether they're important to be filled or whether they're not even important. So, for example, in the land use section, we've got a land use plan that's underway right now as a gap. That will not be in the draft general plan or the one that's adopted now. It will be identified, but it will not, all the land use strategies, the growth scenarios will all come with the consultant in June, and that will update the general plan. The transportation master plan is underway right now, won't be in this general plan. There'll be a gap identification, and then it'll be updated in June, well, in June, after June, of course. Chris is starting a impact fee analysis, which will not be delivered probably till the end of the year, 2022. That'll then update the fiscal part which is going to be identified too in the general plan. And then an economic development master plan is starting with the budget, of course. Trish, I think that got support, I think, with county commission. And that will update the economics section, which is a big section too. So there's a bunch of other master plans that are identified and studies. One of them is a Parks and Rec master plan because we don't have one. And whether we need one or not is a question. And you can't do all of these at one time, obviously. It would burn everybody out. So is that too much, Emily?
No, I think that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Wonderful. Anyone else have any questions before we continue? All right.
Okay. January 10th is potentially, as we say, the British say, the penultimate draft. So it's next to final draft would be then out to the public starting January the 10th and the 18th. And then for about 3 weeks to a month, it'll be out for public review, comment, open houses, hopefully face-to-face. We'll see how that goes in the winter still. And the land use one will plug into that as part of the engagement strategy. And they'll be working with stakeholders before they get to that point too. So they're kind of aligned. We're trying to align these things. That might align with the transportation master plan too, and maybe even the kickoff for the economic one. Because you try to capture as much as you can with these moving forward. That's part of what our 9-table outreach was on November the 10th. It may not have made a lot of sense, especially for people like Bob, who's been through general planning before, because it really didn't have a lot of general plan areas, but it actually kind of hit on the table. So that's the kind of format I was thinking for the open house in February, but it would actually be more fundamental to the general plan this time. And then potentially February 21st would be the Planning Commission's consideration and adoption of the top-down general plan with strategies moving forward. And then March 1st to the County Commission, and that's when the public engagement and neighborhood planning part, which is the fun part to start. So that's
wonderful. John, I hope during the penultimate phase you will speak only in a British accent, so that
his Canadian's not close enough.
Wonderful. Any questions about this timeline? And
I had one question about the timeline. And I have a question, John, and I think it's more for my edification and getting me caught up to speed. But I know that the Utah legislature just this past year, they passed a law that requires a 45-day long public comment period for land use anythings that affect more than 20 acres. And that public comment period is up with PLIPCO and the Resource Development Coordinating Committee. Are our county general plans and these kinds of plans subject to that new 45-day comment period and 20-acre threshold? Just, that's probably more a Chrissy Sloan question than anything.
Well, no,
I'm just wanting to make sure that we're being consistent with some things that just changed this past March.
Yeah, I think, normally a general plan would be because it's touching land use. It's not a rezoning. I'd have to check the state law just to see what it says. I'm thinking that's more focused on a rezoning application that's coming forward, changing a land use designation to a new zone. But we'll look at that, Tony. It's a good comment because
I'll see if I can
we're
find
anticipating.
it for you and send it your way.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I can, that's good too. I would guess that we should be okay with a 30-day review and consideration, because when you look at the overall process, it's more than 45 days.
Sure. Cool. Thank you, John.
all right. So as far as, are we ready to move on to number 4, our workshop, or what are we?
Were you guys going to go into your critique
Yes.
individually? Should we bring up the general plan draft?
I think we should bring up the general plan draft. So while we're doing that.
You guys you can't see that?
No, like, so the actual document, do you
That's
have
what,
it open?
yeah, I did. Okay.
We're just still looking at the agenda.
Attachment number 1.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
There we
Okay,
go.
there we go.
Yes. All right. So before we go into this, I had sent out an email with some recommended focus areas, and I didn't hear anything back. So I'm going to assume that means everyone was okay with these. And if you're not, today is sort of your last opportunity to call that out before we go forward. And there's nothing wrong with saying, oh, I really wanted to focus on this area versus that area. So we do want to try and map people's interest and expertise with the areas of their focus. Granted, we realize that's not 100% possible. With that in
Yeah,
mind,
Emily?
yeah, go ahead.
I had one question on that because I was assigned to section 1 environment, but the first section is just the overview. So I just wanted to clarify what I am assigned to.
So some of the numbers changed, and that's just back and forth, a game of telephone and the draft evolution process, but the name of the section is the one that's important. So for example, in the version of the draft in the shared folder, which I think was what we're looking at, section here, it says section 1 in the table of contents on page towards the top says like section 1 is context. If you go to, well, it jumps around.
Yeah.
As we're working through it, but I'm just going to go through and read out the topics to each person so that we're all clear, and then knowing that the section number may evolve. So first we have a section on context and a section on horizons, which is just sort of everybody co-owning, contributing historical basis to staff, especially for those who have been involved in past general plans and some of the planning that has gone into where we are today. And then, okay, decision-making, OB, that is you. Sustainability, OB, that is you. Josie and OB have both been involved in looking at this question of land use, working with Elisa, but we shifted that around a little bit. Josie to participate there for some of that context, but then OB had you on those first two. Land use is a very big section. And Steve, you're sort of top line there, but Josie, we did have you there as well to help Steve with some of the context that's gone into the last few months of thinking, and also just to lean in there because it's such a large section to make sure that we got the right coverage. Transportation is me. Infrastructure, Tony and Makeda, and then parks as well, Tony and Makeda. So we doubled you guys up. Josie, currently in the draft, environmental is section 9 in that table of contents, but it's the same, the environment. Economy is assigned to me. Public safety for Rick. We have a section on culture, which we don't have a designee yet. So if somebody is eager to lean in there, do so. I had a chance to review it a little bit, but don't need to stay attached to that. Finance is Rick, and then implementation strategies we also have just sort of jointly owned across the group. What we want to do today is if you've had a chance to read through it, or at least read through your section, we're going to go through each of these and invite the person whose name is attached to it to talk through it first. Any specific edits that you would recommend, anything that needs to be added, any summation that you think the body should know. But then we'll actually have a chance, and anybody who wants to chime in can chime in. Of course, you're all welcome to comment asynchronously as well. Okay, let me pause there. Anything I'm missing? If anyone have any questions or concerns about that aspect of this process?
Yeah, can I just jump in there, Emily?
Please do, yes.
One of the things that's missing is there's a checklist that's got a whole list of issues that have not been added yet. And people would have flagged that. One of them is the maps. All of the maps pretty well are not there. That's going to be schedules. By the way, we're not going to embed them in the document. There's a whole section on resource management. I've got some of that drafted, but it needs more work. And obviously the table of contents is not there. There is an executive summary, but it needs a bit of work. And what else? There's a list of other things that are there, but I tried to list as many maps as I could. We have a whole slew of maps, and yet we have to leave some of them out. And we have a number of documents, if you look through this, that have not been adopted formally by the county commission or the planning commission, at least as far as I could tell. And so there's a table in here that has those. And by the way, these are all going to be track changes from the stakeholder review that was sent out. So there's not going to be we're not going to kind of keep changing these. I tried to format this as best I could. There's a list of plans that will be adopted by reference. This list will expand. As you may or may not know, in planning, you try to have formal adoption by the county commission and the planning commission to make it authentic. There's no point in just saying that we're going to refer to these things when they're not formally adopted. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure what's been adopted and what's not been adopted. So that's one of the challenges. Some of these, the first 4 or 5, are adopted through reference in the last 2012 plan, but others I couldn't discover whether they were or not. So I'm not sure if those are in a record someplace. They may be. So that's one thing. And we've got a couple of tweaks we need to make with the economic development stats. Most of these stats are fairly well done though, but Laura and Ben have helped a lot with putting this together. So we've got to get some background data updated too. So I just thought I'd go through, there is a checklist there. And if you find anything that's missing, we'll be expanding that checklist and hopefully knocking things off over the next 2 or 3 weeks.
John, does the full planning commission have access to that shared folder at Google Drive?
You should have. The link is right at the top.
Okay.
I think I sent that to everybody.
You sent links a couple times.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All
Yeah.
right.
That's where I was editing.
Yeah, the checklist is there too, I believe. Isn't that, Makeda?
Yeah,
Did you see
it is
that?
in there.
Yep.
John, from this checklist, is there anything that needs to be, I use the word assigned very loosely, but is there anything in that checklist that you would like to have assigned to a commissioner, or are the kind of top line designations sufficient right now?
Yeah, I don't think the checklist is just a running tally for us. That's all. Anybody can comment on it.
Okay. If there was any confusion about who was assigned to what and you didn't get a chance to go into it, that's fine. What I would like to do though is go through the full document, and if you're assigned to the section and you haven't had a chance to go through it, just call that out. There's no, this is an ongoing process. And then anyone else who has had a chance to read through and wants to contribute, go for it. I submitted a number of asynchronous comments I'm not going to revisit. So, if you've also submitted your comment that way, that's fine as well, I think.
Sorry, Emily, can I just mention one more thing I forgot to
Yes,
mention?
please do.
Bob asked for a copy of the strategic plan. I think I sent that to everybody. At least you should have all got that, the
Mhm.
draft strategic plan. And that's a county commission one. That'll eventually get more traction in the general plan as we move forward. There is a workshop. Let me think about this. There's a workshop with staff this week on Wednesday to go over it with some actual working questions. And we're hoping to bring that to the planning commission in January. It's tough to fit all these meetings into 1 month, especially when you only have one meeting. So we can't squeeze it. I think it's difficult to squeeze it in December. So we made an executive decision, Elisa and I, to delay that workshop at the planning commission until your first meeting in January.
Wonderful. Okay, Makeda.
I love this hand raising function. I just have 2 quick questions. One is, so I think Tony and I were the only 2 both assigned to the same sections. So I'm curious how you'd like us to proceed with that. And then, yeah, I guess that's my first question.
So these recommendations were just that. So if you guys want to split those up, if between the 2 of you, you want to add culture in and have 1 take 2, I mean, there are a couple other people who are doubled up. I think the big thing is just trying to.
It just meant about like today when we're like talking about it, just like take turns.
Oh yeah, we'll just, you guys can Rochambeau for who goes first, and we'll go from there. This is more.
Wait a second.
I don't know. I've never done this particular thing before. So can I check? I don't know.
But I appreciate that. I mean, I think part of the challenge is being not in the same room, and there's just a lot to cover. So we'll just do our best and make it work.
That's fine.
But no, it's a great call out, Makeda. If you guys want to divvy it up differly, feel free to.
Yeah, not worried about it. Just wasn't sure. I'll just text Tony or something. Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Second question was, I am blanking on this. I feel like I still have brain fog from my booster shot a few days ago, but regardless of excuses, are we referencing any like recent surveys that happened? I know there's like some recent surveys like 2019 or something. I'm just curious, we're referencing those in regard to like citizens and general plan.
John, do you want to take that?
Yeah, we tried to. Do you know something I don't know, McKenna?
Oh no, I was just reading it. I was just curious if that was somewhere where you guys were where you were sourcing topics or concerns from the community. I was just curious.
No, just, I mean, the 2012 general plan, I realize that's 9 years old, almost 10 years old, I guess. Any background documents are out there. I've tried to source those as best I can. I didn't get all of them. That's part of the checklist. But that's a good comment. I've tried to do as much as I could. If I'm missing anything, are you thinking like hot topic issues that have come up in certain sections of the county, or?
Yeah, things like that, where we put out surveys to people like, how do you feel about this, or what do you want to see? And often people will expand beyond the issue at hand. So I was just curious.
No, that's good. Good comment. If there's anything like that I'm missing, I didn't go looking for that on the, is that on the county website, or where is it? Where are you seeing that?
No, I didn't see it online anywhere. I just personally have taken those surveys last, I don't know, I think it was like 2019, maybe 2020. So I was just curious if, I'm sure there's somewhere, but I just was curious.
And John, it might be the one McKenna might have taken, but it's probably not fully representative of all views. That was when we did the 313-191 small area plan.
Oh, okay.
On the other hand, that's focused on an area that I think people really wanted to keep kind of so that it had a nice entranceway, et cetera. So some of the attitudes probably in that survey are particular to that area, though it's not bad to look at some of that.
Yeah, so we looked at the small area plan. There's a lot of plans, and I did look at that one and tried to put as much as I could in there, but I might have missed some things.
And all I was saying is there was a survey.
Right. Yeah.
That
No, I got you.
but yeah, good.
Great.
Okay. So I do think well, for the sake of today, I'm going to recommend we skip over the executive summary and jump down to the sections themselves, and then we can come back up to the executive summary. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to find my navigation right now through my iPad. But let's do this. Let's start with so we have community outreach and key plans, context and updates, horizons, and then in my document, section 4 is decision making under the outline. I think it's actually listed as section 3 in the document itself. And I don't have a page on this.
And that would probably be my section.
That is you, Obi. So
and I hope my comments actually are eventually on there. I think there will start with this section. I do plan to go maybe through most of the documents eventually. And I've gotten maybe to page 55 or something like that. So there's only two things I'd like to mention in this
really
decision.
quick, John, you're on horizons and we're going down to decision making. We didn't have someone on the horizons section specifically. So we can pop back up to those first few. There you go. All right. Sorry, Obi. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, only to say there's probably only two things I'm going to mention in these two sections that are probably needing discussion. I think it's a very good section on decision making. Nice to see things laid out like this. The thing I always worry about is how do we get citizens to participate? So I'm not particularly worried that the travel council or Trail Mix, or even NGOs like the Canyonlands Watershed Council that I participate in, or government organizations, they will probably get their views made known. They'll kind of organize to make them get known. But I always worry about, quote, regular citizens. So the one thing I suggested and thought we might think about is what I call a radical suggestion, and it should be in a comment here, but that's okay, which is there some way to have, and then I think I propose maybe twice a year having regular workshops where we do something like we do in the Planning Commission itself, which is to say, well, here are some upcoming issues that we have going to be looking at. And here are some issues that we're working on right now, and have a couple of get-togethers a year in a workshop kind of format, where in fact somebody briefly describes what the issue is, where we're thinking of, we're concerned about the Spanish Valley section. We're interested in, maybe we'd have some nodes down there. Maybe we would do something to make Highway 191 in the South region a kind of entrance to Moab from the other direction, and then get citizen ideas. And of course, I know the problem is getting citizens to turn out, but if you had 3 or 4 issues, kind of advertise them, you might be able to get some citizen input kind of early in the process. So that is the quote, probably radical idea for the this decision-making section, and probably worth discussing.
I know I said we weren't going to respond, but that one I have to respond to. So that's really good. Well, thanks. This goal is meant to cover that as best as it can with the policies that are listed here. I've got a drafted public engagement strategy ready. It's not included in here. That's one of the ones I missed. We're actually going to point to a public engagement strategy that covers a lot, I think, of what you've just said. And that's tapping into the many public resources we have out there through a full kind of engagement with county commission, with elected officials, and with appointed officials. It's hard to do all of that at one time, but we're going to start testing that. That's a strong strategic objective of the county commission and planning commission, obviously, but it's definitely indicated over and over in the strategic plan. I don't know if that helps at all, but we're drafting that now.
Good. No, it is. And of course, this is this funny thing about the plan, the way it stands. It's hard for me to know, what a policy, the goals and policies is such a thing, something that it would go into the general plan saying, and in the future, we should do such and such, or is that too specific?
No, I mean, if you look at these policies, I think what I was hoping you would do, and you still got some more homework, right, Bob? You're not done yet.
Oh, ton of homework.
Is to go back and just take a look at these ideas. Yep. There's 2 major goals here. One of them is actually to use the county staff as a subset of the public and get a communication strategy with them. We tend to miss county staff. And then the second goal is really the general public, and maybe staff serving as champions in each area. So for example, when I say staff, includes the sheriff, elected official, other elected officials too. In most cities, that's what that would be. So the sheriff's office, emergency services, fire would all be part of that engagement exercise, as well as all the departments. So that's capitalizing on this knowledge we already have. But any comments you've got on the policies, these are meant to be action oriented.
Good. So, and I don't see any of my comments. I see a lot by you on this document. Is this the kind of shared document we have up there?
Sorry. No,
just hoping-
it's not. It's not. No,
Good.
I didn't. This isn't hitting off the web.
Good. Okay. Then there was, this is just minor, and I'm not going to go into punctuation or something. I didn't see a place where you mentioned lots of organizations in this document. Didn't see a place where the Moab Area Watershed Partnership was mentioned. It's a kind of funny one because it's not a local organization. It is a state, it is a state mandated organization. That is, they fund it. So I thought it might be mentioned as one of the groups, maybe in this chart, but when you mention a number of groups that aren't NGOs, because I don't think want to get into naming NGOs, because the list is so long and you might forget some, but things like Moab Solutions or Canyonlands Watershed aren't mentioned, which I can understand there are so many of them, but MOP is kind of a semi-official organization.
Can I chime in on that just to add a +1? Given the constraints, the financial constraints on our government, so much of community service comes from private, public, public/nonprofit partnerships. I think Moab Solutions is a perfect example with the work that they do for the unhoused population, as an example in town. I wonder if it's worth making a list that is acknowledged as inexhaustive and declaring them as another source of this proxy feedback so that we don't miss their input alongside the input from staff.
Yeah, we actually somewhat had this discussion the other day because there are some nonprofits, if you want to, use it in those terms, that are a line item on the county's budget. So Seek Haven is an example of that, because they really fill a niche. They provide services for our community that the county does not provide, right? And so I think there's validity in that.
And to your point, Bob, we're actually going to have a decision-making chart that's focused on MOP. That's not included right now. There's a bunch of charts that aren't included. That's one. We've got an engagement thing starting with Mark Stilson with the state. He's, as you know, very keen on a lot of things. One of them is the governance. I would call it the 4 prongs: governance, data, and both on subsurface water and surface water. So the river as well as the aquifers, the demand side, how things are used, and then how we develop regulation and policy. So we had a big talk last week for an hour and a half about this. And I know he's done this a number of times. So we're hoping to start engaging that whole thing with MOP. And I realize this is an example, but the water one's a big one. And so there's a water section here. But to your point, I only showed districts, commissions that have been either appointed or elected.
Yep.
So, and this is the formal process. So you're right, there's a bunch of things that are missing in this, and it's not meant to be everything. It's only meant to be that decision-making. So there's that public engagement part you're talking about is that decision-making strategy. I keep saying that, I know that maybe that sounds redundant, but.
So, wonderful. OB, did that address your?
Yes, I just wanted to raise those issues that weren't entirely trivial. In the next section, I could actually go, since we will need to move through this, so I guess section 5. Of course,
We have sustainability.
This is sustainability.
So before we move on to sustainability, were
yes.
there any other comments related to decision-making that anyone else wanted to contribute? I left some tactical comments I'm not going to go into. Generally speaking, I just on principle would like to see the county lean into the reality that so much of citizen awareness comes through social media. And in one section, we acknowledge the social media plan. I don't see it acknowledged elsewhere. But even more so than the newspaper, certainly more so than print, social media is the primary channel. People get information, seek information, and whether the information is true and valid, think that they have found information. And I think the more the county is present there, the better, for sure. And I think that'd be the case for any digital property. I'd like to see the county invest in some, ideally consulting work, or at least expertise on user interface design, on our public portal, information hierarchy, just making sure people can find what they're looking for. Says digital designer. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on this section? All right, OB, all you.
Yeah, if I were to go back to that section, this is probably for Trish's ears. It is interesting that the county doesn't have some sort of a committee that deals with water. And, the city recently decided they'd have a water committee. And part of that, of course, has to do with the fact that Trish is there, isn't she?
Yes, I'm here.
She's still there. I can't see you in the little screen. you know, the city does it, of course, in part because they have water rights. And the thing with the county is not really having water rights as the county, right? It's through
Right.
WISA and some private entities. But it might be an interesting thought of whether there should be such a committee because water is such an important issue. But that's a little bit away from probably this planning document.
No,
No,
that's something that's on our, it's on staff's radar. We actually talked to Mark. So there's a group working right now, San Juan County, WISA, and the city. You probably know about that, Bob? And I think
Vaguely.
Trish knows about it. It was a bit of a surprise that we weren't at the table. So we're going to be at the table starting, even though they've had a couple of meetings. So that, I don't know if that's a new exercise, but it's definitely something we should be there.
No, I agree with you, Bob, for sure. And the great thing is that we definitely have a couple of commissioners that are highly knowledgeable about
Yes.
water resources in the valley. So that's great.
Good.
Not
And and then, and you know, I actually like the sustainability section a great deal. You know, and it does echo the strategic plan that came out, things like the sustainability and stewardship section of the document. I only really had one kind of substantive thing that I thought might be added. It's actually at the very top of it, section 5.1. So it's really adding something, and maybe more things could be added about the environment, given the stewardship section. I don't have the wording now in front of me that I added as a seventh thing down there in section 5.1, number 7. It was something about water. So something about protect water quality and quantity from our
Protect our
aquifers.
aquifers to ensure both quantity and quality of the water.
You've got it. Good, my comment actually then.
Funny.
I got
That's
you.
exactly what I wrote in the infrastructure area as well.
Okay, so that was probably the only thing. You know, maybe I should have looked more carefully for other items that are covered under sustainability that might be put in the overview. But yeah, that was the one that popped out at me, in part because of my interests.
All right. Again, I have a comment I'm going to save till the end. Does anyone else have any comments on the sustainability section or anything that they wanted to bring up for discussion? So first, I just wanted to call out that I appreciate that we frame sustainability as not just strictly environmental, but that it relates to economic sustainability and the ability to balance those two. I think often that second part of sustainability gets conflated, and of course, people whose needs are met are most capable of also thinking beyond their own individual needs. And so I think I'm very, very glad to see us lean into that. I did have a question related to under 5.3, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We list out things such as recycling programs, limited energy use, water conservation, and so on. I noticed that in many places throughout this document,
wireless power.
We don't explicitly call out noise pollution and light pollution to maximize quality of life. And I know that especially with regards to noise pollution, that can have a very big impact on your health.
Wow.
Is there a reason we wouldn't call that out here? Also, I think someone might need to mute if you have a phone call coming in. Oh, okay. So I don't know, John, I don't know what page it's on. It's under section 5.3. Is this the right place to raise that? There it is, embracing recycling programs, limited energy use, and so on. I would really like to see us add, anytime we're talking about things such as, you know, refuse pollution, trash pollution, and recycling as an offset, I really do think that we should be thinking about other forms of pollution as well and stating them outright.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, anything like that that can be added that's, you know, very calibrated to our area is really good. Anything that's related, I should have included a lot of that in the policies, no? Or maybe not.
There is a section where I know it's addressed, but this just seems, since we're speaking specifically about our principles related to sustainability, it seems like calling it out directly gives us something to point to down the road.
Yeah, sounds good.
I did also call out that, and this might be a little bit more tactical, so it gets down to that question of what now, what later. One of the issues related to recycling in our county has been our ability to accept certain forms of recyclable goods, and also the, I don't know how much of this is fact and rumor, but it has in historic, it's been an issue of how much actually gets to a recyclable facility versus ends up in a landfill somewhere. I don't have all the details on that, but I think it might be worth the county setting a more ambitious goal as part of this. It's not just to support our existing recycling programs, but actually to expand them and to enable us to create more, I don't know what they're called, kind of full cycle products.
Right.
Thank you, close the loop on more of that. But again, that might be more tactical under a plan. I specifically made the comment under goals and policies, section 5.4. There you go.
Well, especially since we now own that entity, I do think he's quite ambitious with those goals. But it's great to put it in here.
So
Yeah, and we talked to Evan Terrell about this. So a lot of the background references that Trish is talking about should be here. They're updating their master plan right now. So there's a gap.
Okay.
And there'll be those kinds of things like recycling, obviously be a major objective.
And I'm raising these because some of these I have comments in the actual document. I'm raising these to make sure that I understand that they are appropriate to go here, and to make sure there's nothing else that would be missing that we'd want to capture. Okay. Any other comments on the section on sustainability? I guess my last thought, and I don't want to go too far down this road. Obi, we should chat about how this pairs with the economics section, because I do think that the two are very interrelated, and you and I can chat about that separately, but wonderful.
Okay, a big section I did add is this one, crime prevention through environmental design. Nobody seems to know what that is here. Bob, do you know what it is?
Say it one more time.
This section on the screen right now, crime prevention through environmental design, SEPTED.
In sociology, one of my expertises wasn't really, of course, this, but it was criminology. Absolutely. Okay. There was actually, let's see if I can find this. I think it was G under on page 35, at least, of what I had, and it was movement predictors, right?
Yeah.
And
that's
when I first read it, I looked at it and thought this was the recommendation. Movement predictors force people, especially pedestrians and cyclists, along a particular route, right? Rather than as a definition of what movement predictors were. So I got it, of course, on second reading really quickly that you're just saying, you don't want to have these situations where you can predict where people go. But when I first predicted, I was just kind of, maybe I picked it up a second time and said, movement predictors, oh, that's one of the things they want. And I read that and I said, no, oh yeah, I see what he's saying. Yes, that's an interesting section to have in. It's interesting because I'm going to guess our kind of plans, general plans, haven't generally had very much on kind of protecting us from crime, and I think it's probably because people haven't worried about it a lot. Not that they shouldn't, and not that we don't have crime, but it doesn't seem to be a focus of the community, although it is, especially one this year with a couple of terrible incidences. So it's interesting to see this in here.
This is where economics also feeds into it, or not economics, the economy section, because part of it is considering the layout of neighboring areas, and part of it is diminishing the potential risk or need for that sort of behavior through programs that support populations that are in higher needs, safe places that people in need can go to, awareness of our more transient populations, and of course, just filling jobs and housing security. So I would love, I mean, again, I don't know how necessary, John, this is your expertise, not mine, of what we group where, but I don't know if it's something that we need to self-reference that, you know, I don't know. This, I'll be honest, reading this section made me feel a little bit uncomfortable given the overemphasis on the visual aesthetics as a means of reducing crime. That felt like a very, I don't know, it felt a little bit something. Am I the only one who felt that? Maybe I am, but Makeda, it looked like you had a comment.
Yeah, no, it also made me really uncomfortable. It just like reminded me of like anti-houseless architecture and stuff. That makes me really uncomfortable. And CP TED, or however you say it, has like also historically been like led to a lot of discrimination. Not that it was implemented for that purpose, but it tends to do so because it like disproportionately affects POC and low income folks and communities. And I think a lot of the time, instead of investing money in that stuff, investing money in services and infrastructure for those communities to help alleviate their situations is often a better route.
Did you want to say something?
I guess, you know, this research has been very well tested for about 30 or 40 years came out of Florida, I think Florida State University originally. And many municipalities have implemented it primarily, Makeda, because of social disintegration. And there's lots of examples, you know, and even the simple stuff, like where landscaping occurs, where lighting occurs, there's actually an apparent conflict between CPTED principles and dark skies, but that actually is settled through the CPTED. There's a CPTED relationship between the two. And crime predictors really, or crime generators are, I mean, dark alleys, those kinds of things. So, I mean, it's really taking a look at where things can occur and trying to anticipate that within the built environment. There is some modification potentially socially, but this is really more of a question about if you're building something and you have to undo it later, it's better to build it right to begin with.
There's probably potential to look at these a little bit closer and maybe wordsmith them so that they don't come across in, like when OB was describing the movement predictors, that definitely came across really confusing to me too. As far as like what the author is trying to say exactly, or the statement. And so, yeah, I just think we could kind of reword some of this and also maybe update some of those topics in case they do not really serve the purpose of what it, you know, what CPTED originally was meant for.
Even on that end, it might be nice to just clearly define the intent of this section, because I could see it being misinterpreted when in fact it's intended to be. I understand the intent as I'm reading it, but it just, like I said, something about it read not great, and I wouldn't want it to be misinterpreted.
Yeah, that was my point.
It's, I think, a matter of simple jargon.
Yeah.
In today's climate, words like force people, escape routes, and surveillance do not fly.
Yeah, that's a much more deliberate way of saying what. That's a good. I
It's
agree with
just
that.
not. It's just jargon.
I might actually try. I mean, it's the section I was partly responsible for. So maybe I could send John some possible edits of wording, not to change necessarily the meeting. And anyway, you know, you'll work on it anyway, but I might do that if that's okay.
Wonderful. Before we move on, it is 5:07. I just want to pause for our second citizens to be heard. I don't know that anyone is on. And there's no one in the room who's here to make a comment. Is there anyone else who wanted to make a comment for citizens to be heard before we move on to our next section? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to land use. Steve.
Ooh-wee, where to start? This was, yeah. Took me a while to wrap my head around it. John helped. Josie was also very helpful. We met and we talked it over, and I'll just tell you what I told Josie was my summary. It all looks pretty good. That's what I got. No, yeah, there's a lot here. I'll be very transparent and say that I would like to spend more time going over the latter half of this when we got into like, the commercial zone, the residential. Yeah, I'll be honest, it took me a long time to like wrap my head around, at what level this was influencing other things like the land use code. And John pointed me in the good direction. I don't know if you want to scroll up to page 30. I might just point this out because it may help some other commissioners, because it's been so hard for me to wrap my head around this process here. But the image on page 30 really helped kind of give the, I think it should be page 30. Oh, let's see. The one I'm looking at is different. Let's see. It's towards the very beginning of section 5.1, sustainability. So we probably just saw it.
Oh, yeah. It's a relationship between the various planning documents. That one there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was hugely helpful because I just didn't know where, like, what was the kind of the chicken or the egg, the land use code or the general plan. So anyways, this was very helpful in understanding. And so I guess the master plan level is what land use code would have fallen under. Now having that aside, I just thought I'd share that because that was helpful for me. I really liked all of the comments people had, and I'm looking at a different version. I'm looking at the Google Docs version. And so, yeah, I don't know how we want to do this. I knew I was going to struggle with my overview on this because it to me is pretty massive. And I almost feel like this is in this refining process. I think if we incorporate any of those comments that were made on the side of the Google draft, the Google Doc version.
Let's start there. I mean, were any of those comments particularly controversial to you that you'd like to raise as discussion, or anything that seemed like it was missing?
Hang on just 1 second. It might be nice if somebody shared the screen with the Google Doc in terms of the presentation in going through it, because then the comments will be there to see, and probably that'd be helpful if somebody.
I have it pulled up. I'm happy to share if I can be a presenter. Thanks for rescuing me through my babbling there.
Are you?
Let's see.
Sorry. Have I got it there? You guys can't see it.
Yeah, John, we're just seeing your Word application. So you'll have to reshare your screen if you have it up. There we go.
Is that
No,
showing?
that's the PD. Is that?
Oh, I have to download it.
So if you want to just open in, weird. It should have opened in Google Docs if it was the link.
Yeah, John, if you go back to the document, you should be able to open it in Google. Oh, there, that might work.
It's still in Word, but yeah, I don't know.
There, is that it? You see it?
Here we
Yeah,
go. We got comments.
All right.
Oh, there
See
you
all
go.
my 2 a.m. comments and commas.
I saw that. I was like, Emily, what are you doing? Go to bed.
What can I say? It was riveting.
I do that at but at 5 a.m.
Oh my gosh, it was.
I'm a morning person.
I got started at 11 p.m. and then I'm,
36, John.
they get less helpful as you go down too.
Yeah, right.
I had one of those.
No,
Looks
30,
good.
page 36.
30, sorry.
36.
Perfect.
Yep. You're there. Almost there.
36.
Getting really warm. There
That's
you go.
36 there.
There we go. Okay. So someone had asked, if any comment stood out as being controversial or, nothing made me recoil. I saw all the comments and to me, they all seem like very valid points. Maybe before we scroll through these, I think we won't get into the weeds with terminology and things like that. Josie, since you and I talked over this, is there any points that you wanted to call out before we kind of get into this with a little bit of a finer tooth comb?
I think mentioning sort of like the chicken or egg thing is definitely helpful, and just thinking of, and I think of John kind of talking about our general plan being a silo and the ways that we're trying to have that not be the case moving forward. And so I agree. It's kind of like just looking at this section as an isolated document. It feels a little bit partial. And so I think continually linking it to at least the idea of a strategic plan, and through that, what the land use code is going to look like. Those are just really good things to keep grounded in for me as well, because then otherwise you're just getting into these concepts. I definitely took some notes as things that stood out for me, and not being super familiar with the 2012 general plan, but observing how things look in our town and in our county. I really appreciate certain things that feel like new concepts, like all of the sort of criteria of smart growth moving forward, the idea of mixed use being really important, and also diversity of housing types, because I think that is something that there's been a lot of resistance to in this community in the past. And I think that it's really important to have a roadmap for that moving forward. So I see that as a pretty important part of this section. And then just things involved with both the smart growth and mixed use, which is, getting away from vehicle oriented planning and neighborhoods, and increasing multimodal transportation. And then I think, the really important thing to create a vision for that will kind of get the wheels on the pavement through other mechanisms is definitely around affordable housing and how that shapes in the future. And so I kind of see those as, I don't know, sort of the high points for me, if that all makes sense.
Awesome. So yeah, just scrolling down. I don't know if anybody wanted to call attention to anything that's been scrolled past. They didn't see them major. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're past that already. So the van lifers thing. Yeah. I think that's really important. And especially I think that impact on parks. I don't know who else is seeing that, but it's a huge bummer when we just see, overflowing trash bins and people continuing to throw more, and people that, take from the community and don't really give back. And so, yeah, I don't know. Is this the right place? It's a great question. Staff, what do you think? Is this the right location?
Probably not. I would say the land use, parks and recreation, that use, as far as parks and recreation is concerned, is more of a master plan to me. That's a question about, and without making it sound like it needs to be planning oriented, it needs to be action oriented. So there's a big social element to that, which I think you can put that in parks, rec, and culture. It depends where you want to put it, of course. I don't think I would put it in, it can be in a bunch of places, Steve. Could be in land use too, but I think the nub of that belongs in the cultural section.
And I do want to clarify, I want to acknowledge the point I just made is more for the traveling kind of van lifer, car camper, and not our folks who are living and working here, but they're just, kind of van.
That's a great call out, Steve. And that's what I had in mind as well as I made that comment, that it's more about the transient visitation population that isn't currently coalescing at campgrounds or hotels.
Yeah,
And don't want to, right? Or don't want to in those cases.
I've something that someone had floated an idea recently, and I didn't make a comment on this, but I just wonder if this might be an appropriate place for in land use to make it possible for there to be kind of like a car camping area that's like safe for people. I don't know if I want to give whoever credit who I don't know where I heard this from, but just like a place where there is a toilet, and it's lit up and safe where people can go. So if there was a developer out there, or if if local government wanted to sponsor this, where people could park, and that was deemed okay via our general plan and subsequently land use code. So
Yeah, I think that's much needed, like some kind of parking lot with a bathroom for people, maybe water. So
And
otherwise they're crowding people's neighborhoods and parking at parks and stuff.
And I think
Well, and I think Josie, Josie, you raised interest in expanding the definition of RV parks to consider long-term use by full-time employees and residents. Was that you? I thought that was your.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, and I definitely want to make the distinction between sort of visiting van lifers and people who rely on living in their vehicles who live and work here, because I think it really is important to, within the land use section, address the latter as part of our kind of mixed use or mixed residential strategy. And I think that it behooves us to be a little bit forward thinking in what that might look like, including year-round residential RV parks. I think I've mentioned like RVs as ADUs in the past. I do think it's interesting that part of the staff report in our packet talks about code compliance complaints and the highest number of them being illegal camping. So I think that there's kind of two sides for this. There's the general population's sort of tolerance level of perceptions around illegal camping, and then I think that there is using these documents in our general plan to kind of like pull in that population. And I think a combination of both allowing that some people are just going to want to either live out of vehicles or out of some kind of mobile unit and creating infrastructure for that. I think I also made a comment at some point about sort of reframing bunkhouses, because I think that has been the other taboo word around unconventional housing that tends to be for more younger transient single people in town. And I think we need to accommodate people like that with, sort of more dormitory, shared commons, bunkhouse style housing. And I think that there should be a real plan for that, because I think the combination of those two kind of like vehicular living that has a legitimized structure and that more kind of communal style housing, I think that those two alone would make such a huge impact on our affordable housing scene, especially around our service sector.
I'll just chime in to say amen. And I know that in Eugene, Oregon, when I was there, they did, either in an industrial area that had lots of parking, or I don't think they would do it in a regular parking lot that got filled up at different times. And they would have toilet facilities, et cetera. They use that, I think, fairly well.
So I do want to say that I totally agree with you guys, and I'm meeting with Mary on Wednesday morning, just to kind of start throwing around some of these ideas, because I think it's time to attack. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to give you some more homework, but no, really, if you literally will just take a minute and if you have a couple of these ideas, I've written a couple down, but just send a quick email like bam, bam, this, a couple bullet points. Because I think the other thing we need to attack is how we're taxing second homeowners, vacant homes, right? I mean, I've been listening to this, KZMU has done just a great job on these kind of, illuminating what other communities or counties are doing as far as affordable housing. So I'm like, okay, we need to attack. And And so if you'll just throw out a couple ideas, I'm going to go to Mary on Wednesday morning and say, okay, if it's another meeting, that's fine. But we've got to come up with some strategies to start housing people quickly, right?
Yeah.
So glad to hear that.
Yeah. So anyways, it's not going, all your guys' ideas are not falling on deaf ears for sure.
So just to play back, just to kind of keep us on track. I think this is a great conversation. I think it's wonderful. Maybe we can just isolate even in
Yeah.
the recording for
Yeah,
you and Mary,
sure,
for
yeah.
Mary's reference. Steve, Josie, any additional comments specific to discussion that you need in order to finalize, or I should say, move forward your recommendations to staff on this section?
I would say the one thing that I personally felt and feel passionate about is under the 6.3.1.2 amenities and affordable housing. I just love, and it's pretty well encapsulated in my comment there, but just calling out that I like that, we want to consider additional bonus for density. As private developers, they need that in the affordable housing range, because if you talk with any developer, the struggle of trying to do an affordable project, I mean, it's real. They don't do them because they don't pencil out. So there has to be some other sort of incentive. And, if you don't have private developers willing to do these housing projects that may be by definition affordable or just more affordable, then government's going to have to come in and do that. And as we've been seeing, like that, even our local governments are struggling to really make that pencil. So I wonder do we need to get more clear on what those bonus densities are, or is just the spirit of that going to be kind of good enough to reference? And then as well as, I think so on a kind of a different note on that next one there is coming up with a clear objective set of criteria for guiding that administrative process for approving those things. Because if it is bonus, like, is that by right? How does it get approved? So that way we just create the criteria. So that way planning department can say, yes, this works. Perfect, checks the boxes, it passes, goes through, and things can move forward and not get kind of clogged up in the system, something that could take days, prevent it from taking months.
We never defined in our land use code what a community benefit is to offset various types of development. This is more with regards to overnight accommodation overlay applications, but I think it applies to density as well, especially given that we state in the section that we want to preserve the historical neighborhood character or something to that end, which is in direct conflict to a lot of these density bonuses. So I think we just need to, for the sake of the gap analysis, move that up in the planning timeline past this of how do we want to evaluate future development against community benefit, and what is our process for evolving the list of those priorities.
And
Yeah,
I think
that's a good model.
if I could say, I think to that point, that's really what this is. 6 and 7 are saying a future land use study is what's needed, because you can't do these things. Well, you can do them on a piecemeal basis, but we shouldn't do them on a piecemeal basis. So there should be a good policy that's there, and it should be well vetted, as Steve has mentioned, and you have too, Emily. It should be well vetted, well understood, and clear as far as what the objectives are and how you're achieving those bonuses, and predictable. So that's where the land use code comes in to implement.
Yeah, and
So-
I feel like,
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, these may not really be helpful, but I feel like they're two of my kind of big takeaways from this section, because I think it is really important to get specific, like Steve said about like incentives. I think that is really important to just be really clear about how that process works, so that we aren't getting, sort of tangled up in projects that are kind of half start and don't finish, or people aren't on the same page about what that looks like moving forward. And I think my other kind of like meta questions around this part of the document are the concept of good design and how we sort of try to get good design through our documents without overplaying that hand and limiting things in an organic sense. And I think somewhere in this section, it talks about like illustrative guides for developers. And I do think that those kinds of examples and almost kind of design and style guides in general are a helpful thing moving forward, because I think that this county has relied a lot on the assumption that, maybe not the assumption, but just that projects that do go forward would have the good faith of having decent design. And I think we've seen a lot of that just failing. And then the other aspect around like infill and how that actually happens in reality, that seems to me the kind of question of how do we fix a lot of the bad planning and design that's already happened in the county. And a lot of infill sort of requires like finding these pockets that haven't been fully developed in the community and really using those to full benefit. But that's such a mix of like commercial and private property and residential. And I'm just sort of curious what all that looks like in reality and how this document guides that. So like I said, that might not be helpful at all, but those are some of my takeaways.
I have some comments under the commercial section, but I don't want to take us down before we've had a chance to get there. Any other comments in these section 6.3, 6.4? So let's go down to.
Actually, sorry, I've just been struggling to. My mute button is really hard to find on my computer. I just have a quick question for you, John, based in your experience, and maybe Elisa as well, and Jenna, and anyone else who's had, or anyone who's had experience kind of creating a general plan like this. Looking at the land use, to me, it just seems like it's almost overwhelming because I could go down like every rabbit hole and get so specific on this. And I'm having this thought that, is this going to be like, can we refine this as we go through the land use code updates, or does this need to be like polished before land use code? Because I'm almost thinking that as we get into the land use code, we might find that we want to tweak some things in here.
Well, the idea, let me take HDHOs and OAOs. Those are in the land use code right now, but there's nothing that exists in the general plan, in the 2012 general plan. So the land use strategy really should capitalize on where density should be, which is the big question in a lot of cases, and where use should be focused without incompatibility. That's one question, but also putting focus on housing that's inadequate or cannot be achieved, or is difficult to achieve, let me say it that way. So a shift in commercial from residential to commercial, which is what an OAO is, or a shift in density to multifamily, which an HDHO is, needs to be reflected in a strong general plan. And the general plan should guide that process. It shouldn't, when the trouble with going to a regulation right away is it really is picking and choosing. It's picking and choosing various areas without thinking holistically about what's out there. So the goal of the land use strategy is actually, I know I keep saying this, but maybe the goal is to actually take a look at where growth should occur, can occur, is equitable, socially equitable, financially achievable, and maintains over time. Those are all silver bullets, obviously. So Steve, it's easy to jump to the land use code right away, but if these goals or policies, and they're not completely vetted yet because we don't have a land use strategy that's fully in here, it's only a framework. So it needs more flesh on it. You may think it's too much flesh. There's not enough skeleton here. I don't know what you think you're saying, but
no, I think it's great. I think I'm just so stuck in the way of having our really not referring at all to the general plan. And that I think is just, it's a process for me to get over, because like everything I've done on this commission and even in, the private development side has been look at the land use code. And so just probably trying to unlearn some old habits that's hard for me personally. So thanks for bearing with me as I wrap my head around this.
We're casting our eye on the horizon. Who do we want to be? I think it's a good call out. Okay, anything else? You can skip over my comments here. These are more tactical. Any other comments in these sections here? I do want to comment on this commercial section. Okay. Again, recognizing this is not the land use code. This is not that level of specificity. I am not comfortable stating that the intent of any of our zones is to be more attractive as a tourist destination. That is completely contrary to where our community sits. I think we can acknowledge that the impact of tourism needs to be managed and that there are needs of that community of visitors that we need to support in order to buffer our residential zones and uses from more commercial uses. But I read this and then it's stated again down below and was like, ooh. So I would highly recommend any framing of this be from the resident's perspective, with the intention of providing commercial services and development opportunities for residents and offset the impact of or meet the needs or whatever of tourism. So that's as controversial I think as I'm going to get tonight, but I actually don't think it's that controversial given where the community sits at large. Any comment or debate? You're welcome to tell me that I'm wrong. I'm happy to hear that.
I want to second that, Emily. That's all. Had similar sentiments.
Yeah, I agree. I think some things that I appreciate in this document are also kind of changing the metrics of where we're starting from. So for instance, as opposed to looking at where are potential places of development, instead looking at where our current level of services are already existing, and also where there's need for infill. And because I think that we've been really good at just following like the dollar signs, which I think is part of that, and which is why like hotels have proliferated so much more than any other business. So really starting from different focal points, which is not what is possible out there and how much more can we expand as a tourist economy and what will push us in that direction, but really starting to like go more inward in a more contained and smart in the smart growth idea of how do we kind of just fill out our community instead of just keep going outward.
I don't know if staff needs anything more than that to move forward. But okay. So let's do this. Unless there are additional comments on this section of land use, I think we can move on to, I wonder if my table of contents is next parks or is next transportation?
Transportation.
Is it? Okay, is there anything else under land use to address? Steve and Josie, do you have what you need as well? Or do you have any questions that you wanted to clarify with the body?
All good.
Thank you both. I know that that's a very dense section. So, all right. So section 7, transportation, was me. I really don't have much to note here that isn't captured in my comments in the documents. I had some concerns about specifically along Spanish Valley Drive in the southern reaches of the county. There's some allusions to expanding the road, and I just want to make sure that we are being very mindful that any expansion of any road results generally in higher speeds and more traffic. And I sent an email to the county commission and to Bill Jackson and John last week with a video of my son trying to ride a bike down Spanish Valley Drive. And not only was he unable to do so because there's no trail, but then we had to ride through goat heads to avoid some UTVs and my bike tire popped. So it was just sort of a symphony of whatever. But I do want to just make sure we don't have many, there's some notes in here that will be addressed in the larger transportation plan related to connections to 191, but that's a major issue. So I'm glad to see it called out. And I think that this is a very well done section, and any of the more tactical concerns, knowing what I know about the current transportation plan, I am assured will be caught. I was glad to see comments around air quality. I think this is another one where noise pollution needs to be addressed. And I don't have a specific recommendation. I need to revisit it. But generally speaking, I think there's, oh, look, see, there's some emphatic excitement in my comments.
I did one of those.
Yeah. Like, I had so many critical comments. I figured I needed to pop some good ones in. No,
How
but
come there's
actually,
no hearts? How come there's no hearts here, Emily?
there
That's-
was,
where's-
oh, you must have accepted that comment. It must be, just, it was there, I promise. No, I think that this is really important because as we talk about this at the general planning level, it acknowledges the fact that transportation is not just about conveyance of people, to and from the town center. The more that we move affordable housing in particular out into the valley and out into the outer reaches of the county and even into bedroom communities, the more that alternate transportation is going to be relied on by that population. The cost of gas is going up. The people who have less opportunity to live closer to work are the ones who are then shouldering that burden. So I do think that we're doing a good job of acknowledging that, and I'm excited to see how that actually manifests in policy. Trails. And oh, this is one, okay, parking spots. This one I do want to hit on. I don't remember it doesn't matter. There was an application that came up a few years ago on the planning commission related to that had this issue of parking spots because it was, there was a question of currently we require a certain number of parking spots. And this was for, honestly, Steve, this might've been your application, but it doesn't matter because it's just theoretical. The entirety of this project was built around this idea of supporting a community of people who are more likely to be bikers, and yet we were debating how many parking spots there need to be, and it was offsetting the ability to add additional housing units, and it was just absurd. And so I think that I don't know enough about this particular issue to recommend a specific direction, but I would like to see us reduce the requirement of the number of parking spots and increase alternative means of transport instead. I don't know how we manage that through a combination of, development standards and public policy, but.
So Emily, this policy, all forms of development, including suitable bonusing and transportation demand management. So as you may know or may not know, that's jargon, transportation TDM it's called, for managing parking and alternatives. So the biggest impact to housing is on-site parking. That's the biggest impact across the cost of housing.
Mhm.
Yeah. So TDM is really supposed to be a tool that's applied to that. That's actually, that discussion is in the transportation master plan. And it's one of those things that's difficult because it's one of those, it's hard to change code. But this is pointing towards potential that could change the code. So bonusing for certain types of residential development that doesn't include parking, that includes public transit. But then you need to have the connectivity there. So as you probably know, if you go to a big urban area, wherever you have transit-oriented development with a light rail, you'll have these nodes that occur. And then they'll do TDM processes right where the nodes are. And they'll bonus density in the areas where the TOD is, to allow for less parking.
Mm-hmm.
And Emily, this is actually the case you bring up. It wasn't Steve. And my recollection was we had a quorum, but we didn't get a quorum of people to vote on it. And I don't know what the county commission did with it, but then we were unable to forward a positive recommendation. And that housing HDHO project was going to have relatively small housing that was going to be houses that were going to be quite affordable probably. So yeah, I agree with you, and that still sticks in my craw, that particular decision.
Thank you for reminding me. My brain couldn't find it. I'm glad I wasn't making that up. Great. So, I mean, this is an example of a part of the general plan where we already have more tactical planning and strategic planning happening. So I don't have many additional comments here. Did anyone else have anything to contribute or anything that they would like me, staff, et cetera, to focus on in this section? All right, look at that. Let's move on then to infrastructure, which is Tony and McKenna.
Cool. So Tony and I just were texting quick about trying to decide what to do with this. So I think I'm going to talk about 8 and then Tony's going to talk about 9 and we're just going to kind of jump in if we have commentary with each other's talking.
Sounds good.
Overall, I felt like this was pretty good. There were just a couple things and often Emily had beat me to it. So, yeah, I think here Emily talks about needing cellular, like better towers. I'm right on board with that. I mean, Spanish Valley is not getting very good service and neither is downtown, to be honest. So I think that's a really important thing to focus on. So I just I think actually I commented there also. I wonder if my comments are not going to show up. Actually, I'm looking at this. Okay, cool. So keep going. Oh, there we go. Okay. And then most of it's just cut like little small changes to like sentences and stuff. I think it's like a lot of this is just like defining things and talking about some pretty straightforward things. So go ahead and keep scrolling. Yeah, this is something I'm interested in. I've done a lot of gray water work when I lived in the Midwest, and I have a lot of friends that do it. And I believe when I checked at least at the city level, they didn't really have practices or like requirements for gray water standards. And those are important to have, but also there was mention of potentially some incentives for more like water use friendly landscaping later on. And so I thought that was something to consider, incentivizing people to have gray water recycling systems, especially for like watering your plants and stuff. So worth maybe considering having incentives there as well. I just added a little thing in here about the cell phone towers. Obviously take it away, leave it, whatever. Yeah, a lot of this is just like information about stuff. Yeah, and I was just kind of emphasizing this. I think we've all talked about water, talked about it like into the ground, we always are bringing it up. And so I think it's really important to emphasize it in this general plan because water situation is only probably going to get more dramatic as we continue to build and planet continues to do what it's doing. So I think I would like to see a little bit more emphasis on water retention and conservation. So, then I just have some general questions like, is it possible instead of impact fees to do some kind of like yearly fee for hotels or something like that? I don't know much about this part of stuff. So that was just a general question that you don't need to answer now. It's just kind of a thought piece. Emily, did you want to talk about what you put here?
Largely echoing yours. I mean, I think just generally larger developments are where we see the larger impact. I'd love to incentivize our larger developments to increase the efficiency of use, particularly, I mean, this is more of a city issue, I think, but
yeah,
in the OAO sector. OB, I don't know if you got a notification, but Makeda, if you scroll, or John, if you scroll up just to 72, OB had talked quite a bit about water hardening, which I was wondering, Bob, if you would just take a moment to, wait, no, sorry. So it's just above those comments. Well, anyway, he'll find it. But OB, there's obviously a trade-off there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So I just wrote I did write the city a letter because they have a water conservation plan. Now you always have to be careful here because the city's plan pretty much starts out saying something like, isn't it great? We've gained in population and haven't increased our water usage because we are fixing pipes that leak water. We are doing gray water, a thing that I do, by the way, Makeda, I'm not against these things. And low flush toilets and onward. The reason they wrote their document is the state requires them to use less gallons per capita per day. And they have certain goals that cities and towns have to meet. All of this is great. I'm all for saving water. The question is, what do you use it for? And the city plan basically was saying, and we can expand our population into the future till 2035 or something. I'm making up the numbers.
Yeah.
Using less water. So this then gets us into a thing where they don't say anything about the trade-off. That is, so are you going to expand population use all the easy ways to save water. And we'll just say in 2060 or 2050, when climate change gets 20, 25, 30% more dramatic, you won't have enough water to serve your citizens because you will have lost water and used up all the easy ways of saving water, like xeriscaping. So one of the classic things, I don't want to go too long in this, one of the classic things is Phoenix, where they think climate change is going to hit severely. They've done xeriscaping, they've done all of the easy ways of saving water. Now they've got a massive population. They may lose some water from the Colorado River, although it doesn't really matter who owns it. They'll probably send it off to big cities. And they have quote, water hardened. That is, they've made it so there's no easy way to have resilience to water shortages. I have to say, I've had some back and forth with Mike Duncan. I'm not saying we shouldn't save water, but we have to be very careful of what we're saving it for. Are we saving it by leaving it in our aquifer and not having more population so we don't end up in one of these things that we overdraw our aquifer? And are we saving enough water for when climate change hits really badly, or are we saving it so we can increase our population? All I think is what I'm saying to the city, basically, you need, and I think they're going to do it, you need a paragraph in there that's saying there's a trade-off as you save water and decide that you ought to increase population. I shut up now.
That's great. Thank you, Obi. Cool. Yeah, you can keep scrolling. I think to my next comment. I mean, it looks really good. It's pretty straightforward, you know, in my opinion. There's some things that I've like highlighted on, but oh, now we're in Parks and Rec. So now it's Tony's turn.
So any other comments on infrastructure?
Yeah, from anybody else. There was one other thing. Where's my notes at?
No, Makeda hit it right on the head. I did leave, I thought I had left a couple of comments in there, but they are rather self-explanatory. They might have even just been technical things like semicolons, etc. My one thing, and I'm blanking, this may have been addressed, but I don't believe it was the prospect or the opportunity in the future for water banking, which is a legal agreement where certain agencies can secure the water rights, and basically an in-stream water right is what we're talking about here. And there are different processes that let that happen. And hopefully, if the barometer stays static, we will have legislation in the next couple of years in Utah that lets water banking happen a lot more easily. That's speculation, but if this is a 10-year plan, and if we're being optimistic, I would like to see some water banking language in this infrastructure. And I don't know if that's more of an environment topic or not, infrastructure being the bureaucracy to allow that kind of arrangement to happen, but that's fingers crossed.
You kind of quiet up there. Do you have anything to add so far?
Just on the water, there's been and you get credit for banking or for any environmental or savings if you're going to get penalized down the road for doing that. So anyhow, I don't know how you can put that in here, but there is attitudes out there on that too. So.
Right.
So.
It's all a use thing at the end of the day. That was everything I had. move on. Are we gonna start? Sorry, Emily, I didn't want
No,
to
go
steal
for
your
it,
thunder.
please.
If we, moving on, really, this one little thing is just an overview type of thing before we even get into the parks and natural areas topic. Early on in the document, and I have a comment there so that it's easy to find, and I understand it's likely a term of art, but something is referenced as the Public Lands Initiative. And I know that that is not what the staff means, but I just wanted to explain that that term, the Public Lands Initiative, carries a lot of negative baggage in our area. And the backstory is a former politician several years ago tried to pass a bill called the Public Lands Initiative, and it was very toxic for the community, really hurt relationships with the Ute tribe. And we just might want to think about a different phrase for whatever that thing might be, just not use that term.
Good call.
I don't prefer censorship, but I know that one's, they just see a plan, see Public Lands Initiative, and you're gonna get all kinds of stuff come out of the woodworks there. The second one, and I'm gonna try and not focus on my specific comments that people can read and interpret in the document, but the general impression I had with the language in a lot of the goals and policies is that there are terms like require, ensure, will, and county shall. And these are general, I mean, if this is a county plan and the county is prescribing what the county is going to do, then I don't see a problem there. In the context of looking down the road and having this plan go through a public comment process and a stakeholder and agency comment process that's going to develop good relationships, the state government really does not like to be dictated to by the counties up there in the legislature, as well as in particular the US Forest Service. Probably don't anticipate our partners responding very well to language like, you know, we shall require such and such a thing to be done. I just know the feds are gonna look at that like, we don't really, you know, they'll just make the conversation a lot either. So I prefer things like encourage, contemplate, or collaborate.
Hey, Tony, let me jump in there, Tony. The goal here is to not use language like that. And if you find it, it's meant to be encouraging and permissive language. And it's meant to, in fact, that's what most of the, if you look at most of it here, I'm not sure where you're pulling that, but wherever you've got it, it can be modified. That's the point.
Okay, so that was just an insight. I've seen how the forest supervisor reacts to that kind of stuff. I learned from the School of Hard Knocks there. The second one, and this was the only one where I really like dove into something tactically and changed a lot. I think top to bottom, the direction that this Parks and Natural Areas section takes is very good. But there's a specific reference, and a lot of the stuff at the top there is just technical edits in the way the framework of land management agencies are described, you know, just insubstantial really. But later on, there's either a goal or a policy regarding the wilderness plan. And it says, I didn't know Grant County had a wilderness plan, and it was adopted in 1995. Now, I would rather than, and looking outward, I know that Commissioner McGann has expressed several times that she wants to have our own little public lands bill happen soon, the way what Emery County got last time in the Bingle Act.
Yeah.
Like you guys want a public lands bill.
Right. Yeah.
If you're going to seriously contemplate a public lands bill on the federal scale, you're going to want to have a wilderness plan that is more up to date than 1995. You have to know the BLM's wilderness suitability study, I think was done in 2001. The recreation management plan was written in 2008. So the Manti LaSalle is updating their forest plan right now. My point being, we should get caught up to speed if we want to include the wilderness plan in our negotiations with other agencies. That might be, I know we've already got target receipts worth of random plans we need to do. But 95 is pretty old. Relatively stale, even compared to the older federal management plans that are on the books right now. So, I mean, the only one older that I know of is the National Park Services Plan, which is like 73. And they're trying to get that one updated too. It'll take a while. That was my only real substantial, like, there's a thing I'm gonna suggest a change. Otherwise, I think this sounds very in line with the needs of the community. And as far as environmental preservation, intelligent design, and you know, recreation and park infrastructure that serves communities and not you know, tourists, visitors, whatever we need to call them. I like it. Discussion.
Yeah, Tony, can I just, yeah, so the wilderness plan, I don't know, unless there's something that I'm missing, that's the only one I could find. And what I was doing is wrapping that into a Parks and Rec and Culture master plan.
Okay. Sure. I mean, yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't really put the two together, but maybe we could make that more explicit. But if the Parks and Rec master plan is sort of going to update and replace the wilderness plan, I think that does a great job. That achieves my goal. I didn't make the connection as well.
And I was only going to say the terrible thing is the Manti-La forest plan is the one that they're currently using is about, I think, 26 years old. So it's an interesting thing, but there may be, of course, whatever the regs are for doing wilderness, you know, all of that needs to be up to date, but it'd be interesting to know, at least for the forest, whether there's a more modern wilderness plan. They're supposed to do these things more often, but they've been delayed a couple of times. Anyway, all interesting.
Here's the goal here, promote the health. I mean, this could be changed, of course, and just to focus on your point. Wealth and being a resident by providing a broad range of parks and recreational facilities and service for all ages, and consider implementation through a Parks and Rec master plan in cooperation with all public land agencies and adjacent jurisdictions. So that's meant to cover a whole bunch of stuff, which I think is missing. There's lots of gaps there. So there's a big project. Anyone want to take on a project?
What I appreciated in this Parks and Natural Areas section, you called out the need for a Parks and Public Lands board, committee, or a sitting body. If Grand County also, you know, looking forward to like real major legislative action, if Grand County wants to be successful in this public lands reevaluation package, Emory County had a staff of people, county staff who were the public lands staff. Their entire job was to work on basically this section. Grand County, I mean, you guys are trying really hard with the resources that you have, but you barely have a recreation department, right?
Right, we don't have, we don't have one.
Correct. I mean, I'm not calling out the county, its commission, or its staff for that, but I might even bump up that need for a public lands board and just acknowledge the fact that we're 87% public land, 96% government owned land, and we don't even have a staff person who's working on this. You know,
That's a really good point. Another gap identified.
I think that's everything. Sorry.
Does anybody else have any comments on Parks and Rec? In addition to Tony's? If not, we can check in with Rick. Did you have anything, Rick, on your, have you had a chance to look at like, I think you were gonna look at the finance section?
It was,
I know you probably maybe have already made comments in the document or whatever, but did you have anything extra to?
didn't make any comments in the document.
Okay.
I did have somebody show me how to do.
That's all good.
The finance one, I didn't really have any comments at all. Since the article written, that's going to do for the finance stuff, he ought to be looking at this and writing this. So refining it.
That's a good point, yeah.
And then the other ones I was looking at was the sheriff stuff or the
Public safety.
public safety thing. So that was the sheriff, the fire department, the building, and the emergency services thing. I read through all those, and then once again, those guys ought to be looking at these with staff and saying, okay, you know, the sheriff had like a long list of things there. It was all good. It was, and then when you get past that, it's all vague. But I don't know how specific you want to get. When you get to the emergency services thing, that was written in a very different way. It's like, we're awesome and leave us alone. And so that, to me, that didn't even fit in here, but and then the building, well, basically the building inspector thing, that ought to be fleshed out a lot more. So, you know, that's kind of my comments. You know, that was really lacking for guys who have to follow a lot of policies and a lot of things. Everything they do is based on, they quote one thing in here and that's it. So anyhow, that one needs to be fleshed out a lot, but but then they are right across the hall from y'all, so you can walk over there and ask them.
Yeah,
So-
we've been working on that.
Okay.
It's been a struggle, I think, to get feedback from those various.
What not, that, well, Bill from building has been great, but and they've been working closely on the building inspector stuff. But I think in terms of the sheriff, some of the emergency services, it's been a little, we're still trying to get the feedback from them on those sections.
Because you read everything else we've read today, when you get to these parts, they're
A little
different,
disjointed.
A lot different. So-
Got it. Okay, that's good feedback. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I had to leave the room for a moment. What section are we on now?
We were Rick's section of finance and public safety. There's two different sections
Did
there.
we skip environment? Wasn't that
Oh,
further up? We skipped environment and economy, I think.
okay. So yeah, I was just thinking, because that was next after in the list that you sent out,
Oh, I'm sorry, I was going off of the.
Parks and Rec, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
let's stay there. So was there anything else related to public safety and finance, which were sections 11 and 13 in the draft table of contents in the executive summary? Because I agree with you. I had the same reaction in going through that, and I think be
There's-
helpful to.
It's still kind of
Mhm.
I think in the primary stages.
Okay.
Yeah. Would you agree with that, John, that we're still kind of waiting on better direction and feedback from those folks of like,
Well,
public
yeah,
safety?
I had to invent a lot of things here, unfortunately. So we don't have a lot from the sheriff's office. I just basically use their website, and then I just put in some things that I know that are commonly there. It does touch a lot of buttons though. In the emergency response, emergency preparation, we got a lot of potential issues there which need to be identified. And I think everyone knows that. So it really needs a lot more vetting. So what's suggested, as with anything, is a public safety master plan that pulls all those pieces together, because we don't have one.
Mhm.
And a lot of jurisdictions where they want to work together, all, 3 or 4 of those, emergency services, policing, fire, and emergency response and emergency preparation, all 4 of those can be housed under a public safety master plan. Anyway, yeah, you're right. We didn't get a lot of response. Andy was pretty good near the end, Smith. And so was Brandon. Brandon was good. But and I say good, I mean, it was just that they responded. So it's hard to get some people within the time frame we had. So we're pretty constrained.
So it's 6:07. We have 2 sections left. I think we're doing good on time. Josie, do you want to take us through the environment section?
So I failed to find the table of contents and therefore the real section for the environment section, which is why I focused on land use code instead. So
All
Yeah, I
good.
look forward to going through it, especially after going through the sustainability section and the recreation section and everywhere else that I think is bringing up things that I'm sure will be found in the environment section. So I have nothing as of now.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing that I had added was some recommended language under 10.4. So Josie, you can take a peek at this and amend it as ever you think is
Okay.
worthy, but it was about signage, invest in signage and limit, I think this was my comment, invest in signage and limit access through protected areas to minimize the impact of resident and visitor recreational use on historical and archaeological sites. So signage, I think, was the real emphasis there. Okay, any other comments on section 10? Oh, there were a few other comments in here that I left. I'll let you just look at on your own. Any other comments on section 10 that we want to discuss or raise as potential gaps for Josie and staff to look at? All right, so we'll move on to economy, which also will be short. This is another section. My two, transportation and economy, benefit from having existing working groups focused on them already. So not much to add. There was only three comments in here. And I might jump around a little bit. 11.2, economic development, paragraph 2, we cite the Economic Development Department as promoting and encouraging local tourism to help broaden and strengthen the county economic base. Now, because this came out of the Travel Council or the Travel, whatever, sorry, yeah, Travel Council, I think that's how it used to be. I don't think that's its intent any longer explicitly. So I want to clean that up and get an actual definition there. Again, that would raise some hackles. Further down, this may be a carryover, John, from past projects. I think we refer to tribes as Aboriginal groups. Is that a just copy paste thing? I don't think we use that language, or we don't use it elsewhere in the document. That was more just, I wanted to, before I went and started to line item, make sure I wasn't the one who was misremembering something there.
What do you use?
Tribes, I would think.
Indigenous or native is the currently most correct way to refer to them.
I thought indigenous was the newest. It keeps changing, so I don't know.
Well,
Yeah, no, and that's what I'm saying, indigenous or
Yeah,
native, but not Aboriginal is what, because Emily, you
Okay.
said Aboriginal?
yeah, it's 18.
oh, there it is, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I added some notes to the bottom of that list. Generally, I think this is a very impressive section, and it follows this general theme that I'm seeing throughout this of recognizing the health of our economy as a reflection of the health of our people, the health of our environment is the reflection of the health of our economy, and I just really appreciated that. The one thing I wanted to raise that isn't explicitly in here, but I do think it's worth this body having a quick conversation on. So I'm an ex officio member of the Economic Diversification Group as a result of being on the Planning Commission here. And we've been having this back and forth in the last few meetings around if we were to give, in this particular, it's specific to an individual grant, but it has broader implications of, is the priority at this moment creating better conditions economically for the people who currently work here, such as higher wages and housing, at the cost of potential diversification of business? Or are we more inclined to support new and expanded businesses in more diverse industries, such as light manufacturing, even if the ability to fill jobs in those might require us to bring in outside labor, which could, on the one hand, create wage pressure, on the other hand, exacerbate housing pressure and start to create this sort of like distancing of those who are in the new economy or new jobs and those who are not. And there is no easy answer to this, and I don't think we've necessarily found an answer as a body, but I'm very curious to hear some of the trade-offs from this group to be able to make a recommendation there back to that group and have it reflected in the general plan.
Emily, I kind of agree with you, and I think specifically of kind of the recent debate around whether to promote remote working as like an appealing thing about moving to Moab, while at the same time noting the kind of Zoom town effect that many towns are feeling. And I agree that I don't think that there's an obvious answer. I don't think that I can say for sure, no, we should not at all court this potential industry of workers, or like, yes, this is a great boon to economic diversification. But I do think that it's an excellent question to ask.
And one without a clear answer. I mean, there's trade-offs to either direction. So I'm really curious to hear what y'all think about those trade-offs. And Josie, thank you. I think that, that's I think that's an extreme and great example of the outside resident of talking about, expanding to new economy workers who don't necessarily add jobs or contribute to the economic base. Any other thoughts? Go ahead.
I
Steve.
really appreciate that question, and I don't have a response other than maybe the answer probably lies somewhere in the middle, because I never really thought of this question or this issue in this way, because I kind of just thought of it as, let's diversify economically because a rising tide lifts all boats, but maybe that's not the case actually. So yeah, I appreciate that there's a group answering or addressing those tough questions and raising them. I'm going to think more about that.
You're gonna punt.
I feel like
Because I have no answer.
That was a lighthearted response and a very good response from you.
Okay.
I have one more thing to add, which is I think that part of this conversation a lot of times goes to kind of in that rising tide lifts all boats, or like pulling in, sort of non-Moab level of wages will start to push wages up, as we have even seen with like chains like McDonald's and Burger King having higher wages than like a lot of nonprofits in town currently. And I do think that one unintended consequence is a pressure on like local nonprofits and small businesses. I hear a lot, well, small businesses should just pay their employees more. And, as someone who works for a small restaurant, I know that they have very little sort of margin to do so. And so, it requires a holistic look at all of the economics of what it takes to be like a small business owner actually existing and operating in town, or a small organization that is sort of subject to all of those economic whims in a very, very real and concrete way. And the kind of pressures it might put on them to not be able to function because they actually can't legitimately raise wages without all of those other economic factors changing in their favor.
I was gonna say, sorry, I'm Josie, were you done? On the subject of new different jobs versus same better jobs, that's what we're asking. When I think about how a rising tide might lift all boats, we need to remember a couple things. Reagan called that trickle-down economics, and we've had that for longer than I've been alive, and you can see where we are. Additionally, you have to consider the size of the pond. You can only fit so many boats in the pond. This is not a hypothetical, or we can just diversify and have all of these things without squeezing out other groups. There is simply no more room here. That's a bottom line statement. We're not going to come up with more places for new businesses while keeping the old ones. Where are you going to build them? That's what I would just encourage us to think about. Additional businesses require additional resources. Obi was asking earlier, exemplifying earlier about how, we're using less water per capita, but our population has increased 40%. I was just in the city of St. George putting out a hypothetical fire. They use more water per capita in the city of St. George than any other municipality in America. And they are the fastest growing city outside of the Salt Lake Municipal in Utah. We need to start thinking about not whether or not it's good for people theoretically shortstop, like, oh, yeah, more better jobs, that'll be great. But whether or not the resources we have available to us can actually support these theoretical jobs that don't even exist yet.
Well, I think the difficult truth that brings is if we assume some fixed cap of how many businesses or types of businesses we can support or whatever, there is then an answer to that, which is swapping out tourism for other uses is a way of trading off versus growing. And I think that's what this diversification panel is trying to do, which gets us back to the beginning. In order to attract those people, the people who currently live and work here in the short term may not have the skills necessary in order to support that type of expansion. And this is this push and pull, because I think you make an excellent point. And also everything is gradual and there will be pain either way. Makeda, I see your hand, so I'll just kind of cap my statement of, we don't need an answer to this tonight, and I really would like to hear your thoughts on this going forward in order to inform as a unified voice, the diversification body, which is the sort of tip of the spear on this question immediately in front of us as a community. Regardless, if we assume some fixed constraint, the answer to that question is going to have an outsized impact on the rest of this document, where we lean into diversification versus improving what exists, where we lean into density versus maintaining existing density potentially and decreasing impact off of that, considering population growth and considering incentives for developers, and putting those in the light of incentives that don't offset some of these priorities. I don't have the answer to this question, but I think it is the question or one of the questions that need to govern this. So anyway, Makeda, I'm sorry, honey, I saw your hand raised.
No worries. My comment's quick. I just think I think that the sloppy economic diversification is going to result in extreme gentrification here, and that we're going to see a lot of our working class having kind of a mass exodus. And I feel like we're already at kind of a tipping point where that's starting to happen because the cost of living doesn't hold up to wages here. And so even though we might be trying to diversify the economy, who is that truly benefiting if we're not doing it in a really careful and precise way? I think businesses like Synergy are a really good example of businesses that have embedded themselves in the community and benefit the community and hire locally. And, it just seems like a really responsible model for a small business that's, a different economy than tourism. So I think personally, the emphasis should be placed on really diving head into picking up our community members that are already here, as opposed to trying to say, hey, van lifers, hey, Google people who are living that, like, who are like want to come live in Moab for fun and remote work, nothing against those folks, but I think we should fix the problems at home before we start inviting new people over. So that's kind of my thoughts.
So, Josie, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally piggybacking on Makeda. I absolutely agree and think that training is kind of an important element to just have hand in hand with economic diversification. And I think, the reality behind that, and I feel kind of part of this is I feel like if you've been committed to Moab as a community, for long enough, you do not have the same level of experience, education, or training that a lot of people in other places have. And so there's this kind of effect of like the longer you've committed to this community, sort of the less desirable like job qualities you might have. And so if we don't have adequate training resources for people who have committed to this community long-term in order to match any sort of goals around economic diversification, I think, as Makeda said, you end up just getting a natural recruitment of people who have been in more competitive environments where they just have, better skill sets to suit those. And I think that in the long run, that is very detrimental to our community as it stands.
Mhm.
And I'd like to punt also, but I would say one thing I think of is it depends on the project. Isn't that a terrible answer? But you have to examine what's coming in, and what you're developing locally. And you obviously you wouldn't let Hewlett Packard come in here with a gigantic chip making place. So it is a tough question to answer in the abstract. I certainly am for diversification of jobs. Synergy is a great example. Actually we'll have, but we may end up with outside people there. The hospital's going to expand, for instance, but it is a diversification in terms of not just being tourist. So it's a hard question. I think about it now in terms of housing things that we approve of. I mean, more and more as we got to the end of the HDHO housing, that is how much was still available, the question would be raised, well, is this a project we ought to approve in comparison to one that might come down the pipeline? That is actually choosing what project would be better with the resources that we have. So it's a tough question.
I'd like to write a memo on this and circulate it with the Planning Commission, but I'd like to hear all of your opinions and thoughts on this first. Could you all, if you have the time and have thoughts on this, just send me an email with your thoughts sometime in the next few days, and I'd love your thoughts as well, Trish, on this. What I'd like to do is circulate a memo, not trying to find an answer, but trying to clearly lay out the trade-offs so that at least we have a sense of the strategic landscape and the trade-offs between one direction or the other. It will probably be something that has to be determined at the project or grant level, but also I do want to make sure that we embrace a general awareness of the trade-offs so that we can act consistently against that and form an opinion that can be sent to the commission as well as to the economic diversification groups. So, and also ideally inform this. So I'm going to put some urgency on that and would love your thoughts in the next few days if you wouldn't mind, and I'll review the conversation from this recording as well.
Emily, while you're there, can you restate that question as you originally proposed it?
I could try.
It was worded so well, and I want to.
Well, this is what YouTube recordings are for. No, it was like, because I will botch it the second time around, I'm sure. But no, Steve, I mean, the gist is there is a trade-off between supporting increasing wages and, as Josie put it, better jobs for existing residents of Grand County in their existing jobs, assuming that we can help local businesses support expansion and wage growth and so on. That's one possibility. There's a trade-off between that and supporting business expansion and diversification writ large against existing business and industries which are tourism focused and service focused, but with the high likelihood that many of those jobs in those new industries and new businesses will need to be filled by people who don't currently reside in Grand County due to skill gaps and personal networks and things to that end. I don't think that there is a right or a wrong answer, but as we talk about economic diversification, do we mean diversifying the livelihood of people who currently live here at the expense of diversifying the actual business stock of our economy? I think is sort of a way to frame it. And there are arguments for both and there are costs to both. So anyway, thank you all. I think that ends our review minus the context section, the horizon section, and the culture section. Is anyone just really wanting the culture section? just can't wait to wrap your hands around more text.
I would be very excited, but I am going to be out of the country for a few weeks, so I don't think I'll be very helpful.
Okay, well, I hope you have very safe travels. Sounds very fun. Okay, Tony's volunteered. So Tony's going to take culture. So quick next steps, and then we're going to wrap up the last bit of our agenda and hopefully get out of here kind of soon. First of all, thank you, everyone. I know that this is a lot of work. I know that there's a lot that goes into it. Hopefully this was helpful, not just to be able to express our own thoughts, but also see how other people are interpreting this document. We should talk about approaching Mary about that list for the commissioners to try and tee people up.
Right.
So maybe we can just chat, about that there in just a bit. We're going to try and pair planning commissioners with county commissioners now, so that you'll have an opportunity to connect and trade thoughts ahead of the January workshop.
Okay.
The running doc is on Google Drive. Everybody has access to it. You can go in and add additional comments there or comment on each other's comments. So we can do this asynchronously as well. And I think maybe we can ask staff every couple of weeks, just a quick sort of like, these are the big changes we've made to take another look at and just kind of keep us in the loop. And then just looking at our agenda. So that means our next touch point on this is going to be that joint workshop on the general plan and on the strategic plan on January 4th. So if you could try and take another stab at feedback, connect with staff if you need to ahead of time, and then we're going to pair you with a commissioner. January 4th is when we'll come together and do another one of these in a round robin. Great. Staff, thank you. Anything else for this particular agenda item? And just thank you so much. This is so much work in such a short time. I mean, it's incredible. John?
No, I think we're ready to rock and roll, aren't we, Elisa? Sorry, we didn't have Josh on first, huh? We forgot that.
Oh, no, I put him, well, we can move the land use code staff report to the end, or we can just table that.
Did Josh need to go?
But I don't know, is Josh still, oh, he's still here. So that would be the very next thing on the agenda for discussion items from staff. Do we want to?
We have the survey. Let's do just a quick 30 seconds. You
Okay,
all took the
so
survey.
As far as the survey goes, Laura is helping me out with her mapping skills. She's creating the maps that were requested in the survey.
Mhm.
So those are really close to, she's finalizing those. And then we've gone through and made some of the suggested edits to the Google Docs version. So essentially it's really close, and we're just going to circulate it at least to you and Bob. I know Obi had worked on it. So we were going to at least get eyes on it before we, put it up on the website.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so land use code updates, is that Josh?
No,
Or-
that's
sorry, I'm
me.
looking at the.
But so let's see, it would be the summary right here, the P and Z summary.
Okay.
So if we wanted to.
Yeah, let's do that so Josh can drop.
Yeah,
and then we'll
yeah,
get
yeah.
through the rest of the thing.
Okay. So do we need any formal? Okay, so we're gonna just skip to the 2021 planning and zoning summary. So the first section there is code enforcement. So Josh, take it away.
Hey guys, how's it going? Elisa, do you mind sharing, put it so I can share my screen?
Right.
Very impressive.
Is that what you were asking for me to do it? To share my screen?
Actually, that works right there. If you want
Okay.
to do that, then you can just scroll for me.
Okay, sorry, I
So,
didn't know.
No, you're fine. No need to be sorry. We're good. Okay, guys. So my name's Josh Green. I'm the Grand County Code Compliant. Actually, I'm the Grand County Compliance Officer. I keep forgetting to say that. I don't have code enforcement in my name at all. It's compliance officer. So what I've done is I've gone through and kind of gone over all the cases that I've had happen this year. This year, up to this point, we've had 48 total cases, 2 of which were before I took on employment on June 1st. The reason why I decided to do the stats for that forward is because a lot of the other cases weren't closed out yet properly, and it was probably because of the turnover that had happened in this office. So it's more realistic to start taking case statistics from this year going forward. So right now, as you see on there, I have currently 5 open cases, and what I've done is I've created this spreadsheet that updates in real time. So will always be accessible by the commission if they ever had a question or anybody else that might have them. But as you can see, I got 5 open cases, which take up 10% of what's going on right now. No violation cases that I've had submitted, 20 of those out of the 48 had no violation at all. And 15 of those were compliance achieved. And then if you add the building permit issued, that gets you 19 so far that we've been able to close out this year. So pretty close to where we want to be. Could you scroll to the next page, please? So this is cases by percentage. Everything, this kind of just shows you where it is. And, as you can see, closed no violation is the majority for the cases. Could you scroll up one more time? I missed one thing on that page. I apologize. So you'll see the most common thing that I have reported is the illegal camping on property, which is 14 of the cases that were submitted to me. The letters of concern that have been coming across have been, questions about things going on like lighting or possible unsafe conditions, stuff like that. And the next biggest one that I had was, I believe it was operating without a business license and operating without a business license and and construction without a permit. So, but all of those have been taken care of at this point. So, okay, if you keep scrolling down, go ahead and go past this one. This shows you, and this will all be put in the planning and zoning office. If anybody would like to see these, they can come down and request them. But just kind of shows you, what the most reported violation has been. And the reason why I did this is so people can kind of get a better idea of what's being reported and what's not. And you definitely can tell that one has been reported more than all the other ones. So, but people like to have a visual when they look at these. And so this is kind of what I was going for, was by creating these charts and everything. So if you can scroll down to the next one, please. Cases submitted by month. June was our biggest month because that's when everybody found out that we had a compliance officer. July was pretty good. So yeah, June was great for code compliance. So I kind of noticed that once everything kind of cooled down, it's like in September when everybody was out on vacation, I didn't get too many complaints because nobody was home. But in October, when everybody came back, that's when I started getting complaints, and also November. So if you could go ahead and scroll down to the next one. And this is a code enforcement fact sheet that I created, and I'll just read these off to you guys. So illegal RV camping on the property was our most reported complaint, with 29.17% of total cases reported. 41.67% of cases reported had no violation. Of the cases that qualified for the enforcement process, 19 have come into voluntary compliance. June was our highest month with 12 cases, and the average time for a case being submitted until closed is 23.41 days. That number would be lower if I didn't have some cases that go, 100 days, just trying to get resolution on things. I have one that's just an ongoing case right now that I just barely closed a week ago, and that that kind of skews that number a little bit. But yeah, we're getting them closed a lot faster than they were before. I have 7 open cases right now that are being monitored, and the average return for an email or for a case that was sent until contact of the person who submitted the case, if they provide their contact information, is less than 24 business hours. So I try to get back to them as soon as I can, unless of course I was out that one week because of COVID, but I was still able to get most people responded to. I think I only had one that week, and it was a business violation. So does anybody have any questions for me?
Josh, I wanted to say thank you for coming. And I also thought, I'm assuming that you're an office of one, correct? Do you have help or staff?
Yeah, I'm an office of one, but I have a lot of help from Jenna and from Elisa, and also Bill Holtz, the building inspector, as well as Cole Cloward and Lisa Siniceros. And then I'm also working with the auditor's office with like Jana Kyle and Quinn Hall. With them, I'm mostly doing the business licenses with them. And then I'm also working with them for the ATV sound ordinances coming up and getting those fleet papers out to everybody. I went through and I created a fleet list that is downloadable. They'll be able to click on there. It'll click their vehicle type. Then all they have to do is enter in their VIN number. And then they can also select the date and all that. So basically made it easier and more organized. So when we get to that point, we can start using it. But another person that I work with too, I have two more people. I have the travel council that I work with, or travel commission, with Mary Lou moving into a different position. I haven't had anybody over there for about 2 weeks now, but I'm assuming that they're probably going to open that position up and get somebody in that spot. And then the other person I work with is the tax commission, which is Jeanette Woodruff. And I contact her. There's a law where we cannot use the internet to prove if somebody has an Airbnb. It's a law. And so if I have all the information I need and it is all on Airbnb or whatever website they're using, I can't say, hey, this is the information I have, you need to shut it down. I have to actually go out and take pictures of their vehicles that are going to be there every day. I have to prove that there's a different vehicle every day. It is extremely time consuming, and I'm hoping that's something that can get changed. But the best thing about that is even though I can't do that, the tax commission can. And so I forward that information to the tax commission, and then she can go after them and say, hey, you're not paying taxes on this. You also don't have I'm assuming you don't have a business license in that area. You have to reach out to Grand County immediately. And then when they do, we shut them down.
That is remarkably ingenuitive. Well done. I guess my point is, I'm getting to a point here, and I know it's late, so I'm going to try and make this quick for everybody's benefit. I know it's getting late. Is there a way to track how much more work you have to do now that everyone knows who you are? And how, to that end, how much more help you would need to manage this workload? What can the planning commission do to get you the assistance that's required?
Currently, and thank you for your compliment, I appreciate that. Currently, I'm handling everything pretty well. I've got it. I'm a very, OCD is not the word I like to use, but I'm very organized on how I do my spreadsheets and how I keep track of everything. I have a spreadsheet that John Gunther has access to that shows him what I do every single day. I basically write a journal every single day so we can see what's being done. The only way I could really track it is by going through and then figuring out how long it takes me to close a case. On average, a case from start to finish, if I was going to close it, I never close a case within 24 hours, even if it's an obvious slam dunk, close this case, because number one, it makes it to where the person who filed the complaint might feel like their voice wasn't heard and that we just kind of brush it off. And number two, I mean, a lot can change in 24 hours. They might be right. I might have gone out there and saw something. There was nothing wrong. And then I come back out the next day and see. So it's kind of, I would say at least 24 hours per case, unless they go on. In terms of what I would need, I don't think I need any assistance at this point. I mean, as Grand County grows, that could change. Only taking care of the county is kind of nice. If the city was included on that, I definitely would need more people. But I mean, a helicopter would be great. So if you would give me one of those, and then put me through helicopter school, and and I got it.
We'll get right on that.
Yeah.
Thank you. If we're asking for things,
Just the holidays and all. One thing that was raised that in passing is if anyone has made it through the first 2.5 hours of this meeting, I do know the sheriff's office has been trained, the dispatch has been alerted that if people are noticing behavior such as RV camping at night when the lights are on, that it's probably, easier to call dispatch and report it there so they can go and actually see it in place than try and get you to track it down at night. Is that, am I stating that correctly?
Yeah, that does. If they do see something like that, like they call it in, and then if a deputy goes out there and witnesses it, then they usually will come to me and say, I have not had that happen yet. I have not had a deputy come to me and say that he saw lights on. And which I didn't include in this because I didn't think about it, but the enforcement process was kind of rewritten by me when I first came on at the request of John. And I was able to kind of get it rewritten to where, you know, it'd be more reasonable. In the beginning, it was like 51 days before somebody got their first, you know, notice of violation letter. So somebody could be on a property for 51 days. At 50 days, and then on day 51, if they were gone, then there was nothing we could do about it. So with the help of our county attorney, Christina Sloan, we went through and we came up with some ideas, and we actually fine-tuned the enforcement process, and we got it down to where it can be done in 30 days. And I also was given the option of a cease and desist. So if I do see something illegal, like illegal camping going on, and I know that they're just gonna head off somewhere else, I can approach the county attorney and John Gunther and say, hey, I would like to use a cease and desist on this person, give them my evidence, and then they would kind of give me the go ahead on that. The other cool thing that Christina helped and Chrissy Hoffine helped come up with is a compliance agreement, which was outlined in the enforcement process that was submitted. And I actually wrote that contract up using all the parameters of that, and I used it 2 weeks ago on a storage container that needs to be moved, and you know, those are really easy to move. So all you need is a crane and you know, a bunch of other stuff. So this agreement I came up with this person, they have a storage container in the setback, you know, they're violating the setback ordinance. So the agreement hasn't going until February. When they're back in Moab, they're going to hook onto that thing and get it out of here. But before, we didn't have that option. We would just hit them right away, and that's not what we're trying to do. The best compliance is voluntary compliance. And if I go out there and force people to come into compliance, then they're more than likely to, number one, they'll have a bad taste in their mouth in regards to the county and how we do things, and number two, they're just going to do it again. So this compliance agreement and everything else has really fine-tuned the process and made things a lot easier for us.
Well, thank you so much, Josh, for everything that you do, and we appreciate you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. It's lots of fun. I like everybody I work with in the office, makes it a good time. So, you know, everything's great.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much. And
you're welcome.
My suggestion, since it's getting late, is so we have the back 2 pages is the summary from staff. I think if everyone's okay with this, I'd love to push some of these staff report items to our next meeting.
Absolutely. The one thing I just wanted to say is we were going to present this staff report at the county commission the very next meeting that's coming up. I can't remember the date of that, but it was just going to be our end of year before January. We wanted to have like an end of year snapshot of what planning and zoning has been doing and some stats. And so that's what this is. I just thought I'd bring it to you guys prior to that meeting, because that's kind of the order I see it in. But yeah, so you can just even look at it. It's not, I don't have to like read it, you know, it's just for your information.
So at our first, because we don't have a second meeting in December because of the schedule. So at our first meeting in January, if you have any questions, we can revisit that. I do want to quickly touch just on the Unified Transportation Plan, just so people know they can attend. I think we haven't had this issue so far, but we do want to keep it under quorum, so there's no noticing requirements. So, and then we do need to talk about the meeting schedule.
Oh, that's right.
So, and then the joint commission meeting, we'll deal with that offline. We'll figure that over out by email. So, okay. So the transportation plan open house on the 16th, John, or you just want to touch on what that is?
Yeah, John, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, there's 2 parts to it. The first one, and Josh, you did a great job, by the way. Is he still there? He's gone. Huh?
Oh, I'm sure
He's such a collaborative guy. He really is. He's more than filled the role. We have 2 meetings on the 16th. One is attack, which is 3 hours. It was going to be 3 hours long. It's down to 2 hours, primarily because we're going to do the whole thing completely online, except for a couple of people in the office. So that's, I think, Emily, you're on the TAC? No, you're not, are you?
I don't think so. I don't know.
No, you're not. No, I don't
Yeah.
think you are. So it's mainly internal staff. And we really need to have those people looking at, there's over 45 projects, I think, so there's quite a few. We need to go through all of those, and then we're going to rate them and comment on them as a group. And then that'll go to the public engagement part of it, which is, I believe, at 5 o'clock, 5 to 6:30 at the Grand Center. So this is all advertised. You should have seen 3 or 4 emails at least on this subject. If you haven't, then we'll start spamming you more. So that's kind of where that's at. This is the first and the second big public engagement part, but this is more of a working one than the last one was. And there'll be more. So we're early on in the process still. So your comments are really important.
Right. If you're able to attend, just shoot an email to the group after today's meeting, so we just have visibility. We'll go ahead and under future considerations, we'll punt those. Quickly on the meeting schedule, I just want to make sure that this current schedule works for everyone. We meet the 2nd and 4th Mondays. Is there any reason anyone want to modify that or suggest a change going into next year? Otherwise, I just need to let the
I think it's
administration know.
great the way it is, although I did notice when I was going through the whole calendar for the whole
Mhm.
year, there's 2 months, I think it's March and November, where it would fall on the same week as the county commission meetings, just the way that it's set up, but I don't know if that matters. I
I think we had that this
probably
year.
not a big deal. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Weird
like it.
Mondays. Okay. Makeda, it looked like you came off mute. Did you want to contribute?
I was just gonna like vaguely suggest or ask about like potentially moving it like half an hour later or something. I don't know how I feel about that. I just, with work, it's generally a little bit harder for me, but I've clearly made it work. So just thought I'd toss it out there.
I don't disagree with you. Mondays, my first meeting was at 7:30 a.m. So I'm fine with, a buffer anyway. Historically, over the last year and a half or so, I think largely due to COVID and staff changes, we haven't had a lot of applications in front of us. In the past, though, when we had a lot of applications, there were days we were here till 9:30 or so at night, and that's why we moved it up. I mean, OB, you probably have more context than anyone for that and opinion, and I'd be curious to hear staff's thought, because you're already here all day too.
Well, we did take out a lot of the
Mhm.
applications that would need to come
That's
to
a great
planning
point.
commission. So
Right.
it has reduced a lot, I've noticed, and the rezones are kind of the only ones that I can think of
Mhm.
that would come to you.
Good point.
So, yeah, I think that it could be potentially later start date or start time.
And certainly 4:30 wouldn't bother me
Mhm.
either. That'd be a good time.
And it would help us those times where we do have a public hearing, because we have tried to keep the public hearings till 5 p.m. and when we have a lighter front of meeting. Steve, did you want to make a comment?
4:30 actually works for me, especially if we start going to in-person meetings again. Then I can make them, because I generally will wrap up with work at about 4 or 10 till. So
So
I'm okay with 4:30.
should we straw poll this? All in favor of 4:30 start going into next year?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, no one is staunchly opposed? And the 2nd and 4th Mondays still work? Okay, so I'll let county staff know that when we're gonna make that modification. Okay, that is it. We have a motion to adjourn.
I will move.
Hey,
Second.
motion from Tony, seconded by Obi, all in favor. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful